The Imperium of Man stretched across 1,000,000 worlds, each one a monument to humanity's endless war for survival. On most of these worlds, hope had died 10,000 years ago, buried beneath the weight of theocratic fascism and industrial decay. The citizens who labored in hive cities, stacked miles high, knew only 3 truths. The Emperor protects, heresy invites death, and every soul was disposable in the galaxy's grinding machinery of war. Into this nightmare, something impossibly out of place was about to arrive. The warp storm tore reality like wet paper above Hive Tertius on the world of Mordian's Gate. Alarms screamed across the upper spires as augur arrays detected the breach. Another daemon incursion. The tech priests assumed. Another day ending in blood and fire. But what emerged from the churning violet madness wasn't a daemon ship or Xenos raider. It was a battered spacecraft no larger than an Aquila lander, its hull scorched and crackling with dissipating warp energy. The vessel, sleek, angular, and utterly wrong by Imperial design standards, screamed through Mordian's Gate's polluted atmosphere, trailing black smoke. It carved a burning path across the rust-orange sky before slamming into the industrial district of Hive Tertius, with enough force to collapse 3 hab blocks and vaporize a Mechanicus waste reclamation facility. The impact killed 4,000 souls instantly. The Administratum would file the report in triplicate over the next 6 months. Duke Nukem kicked open the crumpled hatch of his ship and stumbled into ankle-deep toxic sludge, his signature sunglasses somehow still perched on his face, despite the crash that would have liquefied a normal human. He surveyed the smoking crater, the twisted rebar jutting from collapsed ferrocrete structures, and the acid rain beginning to fall from clouds, the color of diseased flesh. "Well," Duke said, cracking his neck, "this is a shithole." He'd been en route back to Earth after clearing out an alien breeding facility on Titan when something had gone catastrophically wrong with his captured alien transport. One moment he was enjoying some well-earned whiskey. The next his instruments were screaming, and reality itself was turning inside out around him. The things he'd seen in that purple hellscape, the faces, the screaming geometry, the sensation of something vast and hungry noticing him, those he'd file under shit to drink away later. Duke checked his inventory. Desert Eagle with 3 magazines, RPG launcher with 4 rockets, pipe bombs, a few packs of steroids he'd liberated from an alien medical bay, and his signature gold-plated pistol. The shotgun had been lost in the crash, which pissed him off more than the fact he had no idea where the hell he was. The air tasted like burning plastic and rotted meat. The architecture surrounding the crater was all Gothic brutalism, massive stone edifices carved with skulls, eagles, and religious iconography that would make a cathedral look modest. Every surface was either rusted metal or stained stone, and the few working lights cast everything in a sickly yellow glow. "Note to self," Duke muttered, climbing out of the crater. "Fire the travel agent." That's when he noticed a crowd. Dozens of people, if you could call them that, had gathered at the crater's edge. They wore filthy rags and bore the malnourished look of people who'd never seen real sunlight. Their skin was pale as corpses, their eyes hollow and fearful. Many had crude bionics replacing limbs, rusty metal arms, whirring leg braces, even a few with half their faces replaced by corroded machinery. They stared at Duke with a mixture of terror and desperate hope, as if waiting for him to pronounce judgment on their worthless lives. "The Emperor protects," one man whispered, falling to his knees. "An angel," a woman breathed. "An angel of death has come." Duke raised an eyebrow behind his shades. "Angel? Baby? I'm better than that. The crack of gunfire cut him off. 3 figures in black armor emerged from the smoke, their carapace gleaming with the insignia of the Adeptus Arbites, the Imperium's brutal law enforcement. Their helmets were featureless save for red optical lenses, and each carried a shotgun that looked like it could punch through a tank. The lead Arbites raised a gauntleted hand, and when he spoke, his voice was amplified and devoid of humanity. "Unidentified arrival. You have violated Imperial airspace, destroyed Imperial property, and murdered Imperial citizens. By the authority of the Adeptus Arbites, you are condemned. Sentence: Death. The Emperor's justice is swift. Duke looked at his smoking crash site, then at the Arbites, then back at the crash site. You know what? Fair. Then he drew both pistols and opened fire. If you want to see more characters enter different universes, hit that subscribe button and drop the name of a character and the universe you'd want to see them in down in the comments below. In the grim darkness of the far future, there is only war. The Desert Eagle barked 3 times, each shot finding the gap between helmet and chest plate on the lead Arbites. The other 2 scattered, their training kicking in as they raised their shotguns. Duke was already moving. He'd fought alien cops, demon cops, and robot cops. These guys were just cops with fancier armor. He rolled behind a chunk of crashed hull as shotgun shells turned the metal into Swiss cheese, came up firing, and put 2 rounds through the knee joint of the second Arbites. The man collapsed, screaming, and Duke silenced him with a headshot that painted the inside of his helmet red. The third Arbites was smart. He grabbed a civilian, a teenage girl with a cybernetic arm, and used her as a shield while backing toward cover. Drop your weapons, heretic. The Emperor sees your sins. Duke's expression darkened behind his sunglasses. He'd faced this situation 100 times. Aliens taking hostages, terrorist scum hiding behind innocents. Back home, he'd always found the shot. He found it here too. The round took the Arbites through the optical lens, scrambling whatever was behind the helmet. The girl screamed and ran as the corpse toppled backward. The crowd of civilians scattered like rats, disappearing into the hive's shadows. Smart people. Duke holstered his pistols and searched the dead Arbites, finding nothing useful except some weird coins with a 2-headed eagle stamped on them and a data slate he couldn't read the script. Looked like someone had crossed Latin with prison tattoos. Sirens wailed in the distance. More were coming. Duke looked up at the towering hive city stretching into the poisoned sky, at the gargoyles and skulls carved into every surface, at the industrial hell he'd crashed into. Whatever this place was, it made Los Angeles look like paradise. Looks like I'm gonna need a bigger gun, Duke said, and disappeared into the shadows of Hive Tertius. Behind him, the civilians who'd witnessed the arrival whispered prayers to the Emperor and made the sign of the Aquila across their chests. They'd seen something impossible. A man who'd killed the Arbites without fear, without prayer, without even acknowledging the Emperor's name. In the 41st millennium, such men were called heretics, and heretics burned. Duke moved through the underhive like a shadow with an attitude problem. The industrial district had given way to a maze of rusted catwalks, leaking pipes that dripped chemicals best left unnamed, and corridors lit by flickering luminators that cast everything in stuttering yellow light. The air was thick enough to chew, tasting of promethium fumes and human desperation. He'd been in worse. The alien hive on LV 426 had been worse. The demon dimension he'd briefly visited had been worse. But this place had a special kind of misery. The kind that came from millions of people crammed into a vertical city where the bottom levels never saw daylight and hope died in infancy. Duke paused at an intersection where 3 corridors met beneath a statue of a skull-faced warrior saint. The craftsmanship was impressive in a morbid way. Every skull in the saint's armor was individually carved, thousands of them. The inscription at the base read something about blessed sacrifice and the Emperor's mercy through death. Cheerful, Duke muttered. Footsteps echoed from the left corridor. Heavy, synchronized, military. Duke pressed himself into an alcove behind a cluster of corroded pipes as a patrol marched past. 20 soldiers in flak armor, carrying lasguns, crude-looking rifles with glowing power packs. They moved with the discipline of professional troops, their faces hidden behind rebreather masks. Imperial Guard, though Duke didn't know that. He just knew they looked more competent than the cop types he'd killed topside. Once they passed, Duke continued deeper. First priority: find someone who spoke English and wasn't immediately trying to kill him. He found her in what passed for a bar 3 levels down. The establishment was a hole carved into the hive structure, lit by bioluminescent fungus growing in cracked aquariums along the walls. The clientele were under-hive dwellers, mutants mostly, with extra limbs or misshapen features that marked them as genetic rejects in the Imperium's eyes. They huddled over drinks that looked radioactive, and probably were. speaking in low tones. Duke walked in like he owned the place, which was his default setting. Every conversation died. 36 pairs of eyes, some human, some decidedly not, tracked him to the bar. The bartender was a woman with 4 arms and a face that had been beautiful before acid scars had rewritten it. She sized Duke up with eyes that had seen everything twice and wasn't impressed by any of it. "You're new," she said in accented Gothic that Duke's ears translated as English with an Eastern European flavor. "Arbites don't come down here, but you just killed 3 topside. Word travels fast." Duke leaned on the bar. "I need information. Where am I? What year is it? And how do I get off this planet?" The woman's 4 arms moved independently. One cleaning a glass, another checking a weapon under the counter, a third drumming fingers on the bar, the 4th scratching at her scarred cheek. "You're on Mordian's Gate Tertius Hive, under Hive level designation Gamma 7. The year is 047, M42, by Imperial reckoning, and you don't leave. Nobody leaves except in a corpse transport." Duke processed that. M42. He'd seen weirder classification systems, but that number suggested this was some kind of distant future or alternate timeline. The architecture, the technology level, it was medieval meets industrial nightmare. Like someone had crammed the Dark Ages into a factory and let it metastasize for centuries. "What's the local government?" Duke asked. "The Imperium of Man," the bartender said like it was obvious. "Ruled by the God Emperor of mankind, from Holy Terra. May his light guide us through the darkness." She said the prayer by rote, without feeling. God Emperor. Right. Duke had dealt with alien god kings before. Usually they bled when you shot them enough. "I'm guessing he's not big on dissent." The bartender's laugh was bitter. "The Imperium doesn't do dissent. You obey, you serve, you die for the Emperor. That's the contract. Breaking it is heresy. Heresy is death." She leaned closer, her voice dropping. "You killed Arbites without prayer, without hesitation, without invoking the Emperor's name. That makes you either insane or the most dangerous kind of heretic." Before Duke could respond, the door exploded inward. Not figuratively. The reinforced metal door blew off its hinges in a shower of molten slag as a man in powered armor stepped through the smoking entrance. He was 7 feet tall in his black carapace plate, every surface inscribed with prayers and purity seals. His helmet bore the symbol of a stylized eye wreathed in skulls. In his hands he carried a bolt pistol, a weapon Duke recognized as serious firepower from the barrel size alone, and a power maul crackling with blue energy. "I am Interrogator Hendrik, of the Ordo Hereticus," the figure announced, his vox-amplified voice filling the bar. "All citizens kneel and submit to the Emperor's justice." Every mutant in the bar dropped to their knees immediately, pressing foreheads to the filthy floor. Even the bartender fell, her 4 arms spread in supplication. Duke remained standing at the bar, one hand near his pistol. Hendrik's helmet turned toward him with mechanical precision. "You, the stranger, the heretic who killed Arbites without prayer. You are under arrest by order of the Holy Inquisition. Surrender, and your death will be clean. Resist, and I will ensure your suffering spans days." Duke took a long look at the armored figure, at the crackling power maul, at the bolt pistol that could probably blow a hole through a car engine. He considered his options. 3 magazines for the Desert Eagle, 4 rockets, some pipe bombs, and his natural charm. "Here's a counteroffer," Duke said, finishing his drink. "How about you and your boss go fuck yourselves?" He drew and fired in one smooth motion. The Desert Eagle roared, and Hendrik's helmet snapped back as the round sparked off the armored faceplate. It didn't penetrate, but it bought Duke a second to dive behind the bar as Hendrik opened fire with the bolt pistol. The first round hit where Duke had been standing and actually exploded, blowing a crater in the bar and shredding 2 mutants who'd been kneeling nearby. The mass reactive warhead turned flesh and bone into red mist. "Shit!" Duke rolled as another round cratered the floor inches from his head. the explosive force making his ears ring even through the adrenaline. These weren't bullets, these were miniature rockets, designed to punch through armor before detonating inside the target. The bartender scrambled past him on all fours, abandoning her establishment. The remaining patrons were already fleeing through back exits, leaving Duke alone with an armored religious fanatic. Duke came up throwing. The pipe bomb sailed through the air, trailing smoke, and caught Hendrik in the chest. The explosion staggered the interrogator, but didn't breach his armor. It did, however, crack several purity seals and scorch the prayers inscribed on his chestplate. "You dare defile the Emperor's benedictions?" Hendrik roared, advancing with his power maul raised. "Your death will sanctify this place." Duke backpedaled, firing the Desert Eagle at weak points, joints, the neck seal, the optical lenses. Others found gaps and drew blood, but Hendrik kept coming like a religious terminator. The power maul swung down, and Duke barely dodged. The weapon hit the floor and vaporized a section of ferrocrete, the disruption field atomizing matter at the molecular level. Duke rolled, came up, and emptied his magazine into Hendrik's knee joint at point-blank range. The armor held, but the kinetic impact buckled the servos. Hendrik stumbled, and Duke saw his opening. He grabbed a chair, solid industrial metal, and smashed it across Hendrik's helmet with enough force to dent the ceramite. The interrogator staggered, and Duke followed up with a kick to the damaged knee that sent the armored figure crashing to one knee. Duke pressed the Desert Eagle against the back of Hendrik's helmet, where the neck seal met the armor. "Groovy," Duke said, and pulled the trigger. The round punched through the flexible joint and scrambled whatever was inside. Hendrik collapsed forward, armor systems dying with a descending whine. Duke stood there, breathing hard, surrounded by destruction and corpses. His ears rang from the bolt pistol detonations. Blood his and Hendrik's dripped onto the floor. He'd just killed some kind of religious enforcer in power armor, which probably wasn't going to help his avoid attention strategy. From Hendrik's belt, Duke pulled a data slate that actually had labels in recognizable script and what looked like a communicator. He took both, along with a bolt pistol and 2 spare magazines from the corpse's belt. The weapon was heavy as hell, but Duke had fired alien plasma cannons. He'd manage. The bar was a smoking ruin. The fungus lights had shattered, leaving only emergency illuminators casting red light across the carnage. Duke looked at the dead interrogator, at the crater where the bolt rounds had hit, at his own reflection in a cracked mirror behind the bar. "Welcome to whatever the hell this is," he told his reflection. Outside, sirens wailed. Closer now. More were coming. They'd keep coming until he was dead or converted to their insane religion. Duke had faced those odds before, usually while naked and surrounded by alien strippers, but the principle was the same. He disappeared into Tertius Hive's shadows, leaving the Emperor's servants to find their dead. Behind him, the remaining patrons whispered new prayers. They'd witnessed a mortal man kill an interrogator of the Inquisition in single combat. Such a thing was impossible. The Inquisition's agents were the Emperor's chosen, enhanced and armored, and utterly lethal. Yet the stranger had killed him anyway. Without prayer, without fear, without even acknowledging the Emperor's protection. In the Underhive, a new legend began to spread. And legends in the 41st millennium always attracted attention from forces far worse than mere law enforcement. Duke spent the next 2 days learning exactly how screwed he was. The data slate he'd stolen from interrogator Hendrik painted a picture of a galaxy that made his demon-infested Earth look like a vacation resort. The Imperium of Man sprawled across 1,000,000 worlds, unified by a fanatical religion worshipping a 10,000-year-old corpse kept alive by machinery and the daily sacrifice of 1,000 psychics. Humanity was besieged on all fronts. Alien races that ranged from green-skinned warriors to galaxy-devouring monsters, and something called chaos that lived in a parallel dimension of literal hell. The technology level was schizophrenic. They had faster-than-light travel through something called the warp, but most citizens lived in conditions that would make medieval serfs sympathetic. Innovation was heresy. Questioning authority was heresy. Being born with the wrong genes was heresy. The penalty for heresy was creative death followed by eternal damnation. And I thought LA had problems, Duke muttered. scrolling through reports of entire planets being virus-bombed into sterility for the crime of insufficient faith. He'd holed up in an abandoned administratum office on level Gamma 12, barricading himself behind filing cabinets filled with requisition forms dating back 200 years. The Imperium's bureaucracy was so massive that this office had been forgotten, left to decay while the paperwork slowly composted into organic sludge. Duke had used the time to inventory his situation. The bolt pistol worked. He'd test-fired it into a wall and watched it blow a hole the size of a basketball through 3 feet of ferrocrete. Ammunition was the problem. He had 16 rounds total. The Desert Eagle was down to 1 magazine. The RPG had 4 rockets left. Pipe bombs were depleted. The steroids would give him an edge in close combat, but wouldn't stop a power maul from atomizing his skull. He needed allies, more weapons, and information about how to get off this nightmare world. The data slate chirped. Duke had managed to access the Arbite's communication network. Their encryption was impressive, but he'd cracked alien computer systems defended by AI gods. This was just math and patience. A priority alert scrolled across the screen. Priority alert. Inquisitorial investigation. Level Tertius lockdown initiated. Subject: unidentified heretic. Description: male. Augmented physique. Refuses imperial benediction. Armed with Xenos. Archaeotech weapons. Threat level: excommunicate traitorous. Capture preferred. Termination authorized. Inquisitor Catherine Voss assumes command of investigation. Duke's eyebrow rose behind his sunglasses. Excommunicate traitorous. That sounds bad. The data slate included a dossier on Inquisitor Voss. Age: 43 standard years. Service record: 28 years. Specialization: rooting out chaos cults and unsanctioned psychers. Methods: thorough, ruthless, pragmatic. Notable operations: Purge of Sanctus VII. Population 17 billion. Reduced to 4 million. Breaking of the Crimson Covenant heretical cult. 300,000 executions. Investigation of the fallen angels status. Redacted. The attached picked capture showed a woman in black power armor, inscribed with prayers. Her face severe and beautiful in the way a blade was beautiful. All sharp edges and lethal purpose. Her eyes were augmented. One replaced with a bionic lens that glowed red in the image. She carried a bolt pistol and a power sword, and her expression suggested she'd used both extensively. Great, Duke said. Religious fanatic Robocop with anger management issues is looking for me. This day keeps getting better. A knock at the barricaded door made him reach for the bolt pistol. Stranger, a voice called from outside. Female, young, speaking Gothic, with the accent of someone educated above the underhive. I know you're in there. I'm not Arbites, not Inquisition, and I'm not here to kill you. I'm here to offer information. May I enter? Duke considered shooting through the door, but curiosity won. He'd always had a weakness for mysterious women with information. You've got 30 seconds before I decide you're a threat. The barricade shifted as someone pushed from outside, not forcing it, just testing. My name is Cassandra. I represent interests that don't align with the Imperium's. We've been watching you since your arrival. You've killed 3 Arbites and an interrogator without breaking a sweat. That makes you either supremely dangerous or supremely stupid. I'm betting on dangerous. Why should I trust you? Because Inquisitor Voss is mobilizing a full inquisitorial task force to find you. Arbites, Imperial Guard, sanctioned psychers, even a squad of Adepta Sororitas, that's the Sisters of Battle. The Emperor's warrior nuns with flamethrowers and power armor. You've got maybe 6 hours before this level is purged, with you in it. I can offer you a way out. Duke moved the barricade slightly and cracked the door. The woman standing outside was in her late 20s, dressed in the functional clothing of the Hive's merchant class. Nothing fancy, but clean and well-maintained compared to the rags most wore. She had dark hair tied back severely, pale skin marked with chemical burns on her hands, and eyes that assessed Duke with professional interest. More importantly, she was unarmed except for a stub pistol at her belt, basically a large caliber revolver. Deadly, but not an immediate threat. "You've got 3 minutes, Duke said, not lowering the bolt pistol. "Talk." Cassandra entered, glancing around the abandoned office with the air of someone used to hiding in forgotten spaces. "You're not from this galaxy. Your weapons, your clothing, your complete ignorance of Imperial doctrine, you're an anomaly. The Inquisition will dissect you to understand how you got here. The Mechanicus would worship your technology as archaeotech, while simultaneously condemning it as Xenos taint. Either way, you die screaming. And your bosses are different. How? Because we're not fanatics." Cassandra produced a data slate from her coat. "We're a network of traders, smugglers, and information brokers who operate in the Imperium's shadow. We don't worship the Emperor, don't care about doctrine, and profit from moving things the Imperium doesn't want moved. You're valuable to us alive and free, not dead and studied." Duke took the data slate. It showed shipping manifests, smuggling routes, and what looked like black market weapon dealers. "And in exchange for your help? And you work for us. Your skills are obvious combat, infiltration, zero hesitation. We have enemies among the Underhive's gangs and the competing smuggling rings. You help us. We keep you hidden from the Inquisition and eventually get you off-world. Mutually beneficial." It was a reasonable offer. Too reasonable. Duke had made his career not trusting reasonable offers from mysterious strangers. "What's the catch?" Cassandra smiled, and it wasn't comforting. "The catch is that we're currently at war with a gang called the Disciples of the Red Hand. They're a Khornate cult, worshippers of one of the Chaos Gods. They've been cutting into our territory, sacrificing our people to their blood god, and generally making business impossible. We need someone who can fight them without fear, someone who doesn't understand how terrifying they're supposed to be." Duke had fought demons before. Hell, he'd been to hell, the actual place, and kicked its ass. How bad could these chaos cultists be? "When do we start?" "Tonight. There's a meeting between the cult and a corrupt Arbites unit in Sector Gamma 17. If we hit them during the exchange, we can cripple both groups. You in?" Duke checked the bolt pistol, felt the reassuring weight of the Desert Eagle at his hip, and smiled the smile of a man who was about to ruin someone's day. "Baby," he said, "it's time to kick ass and chew bubblegum." "And I'm all out of gum." Cassandra blinked. "It's a figure of speech. Let's go kill some cultists." 6 hours later, Duke learned exactly what chaos meant in this nightmare galaxy. Sector Gamma 17 was an abandoned manufacturing district where the Mechanicus had once produced something called auto-sanctified bolt shells. Before a worker rebellion 3 centuries ago had led to the entire area being sealed. The architecture was typical Imperium brutalism. Massive stone halls carved with eagles and skulls, rusted machinery looming like industrial gods, and the ever-present stench of chemicals and decay. Duke crouched on a catwalk overlooking the main floor where the exchange was happening. Cassandra and 3 of her smugglers, hard-faced men with lasguns and the look of people who'd killed before, flanked him. Below, 2 groups met in the flickering light of burning barrels. The Arbites were easy to identify. 6 figures in black carapace armor, their helmets removed to show faces marked by corruption. Not just moral corruption, but physical. One man's face was covered in weeping sores that pulsed with unnatural life. Another had eyes that glowed yellow like a predator's. They were laughing as they unloaded crates of weapons to the cultists. The Disciples of the Red Hand were worse. There were maybe 20 of them, dressed in flayed human skin and armor, cobbled from scrap metal. Every surface of their bodies was carved with symbols that hurt to look at: 8-pointed stars, angular runes, and sigils that seemed to squirm when Duke's eyes focused on them. They bled from 1,000 self-inflicted cuts, and the blood didn't drip, it flowed upward, defying gravity, forming patterns in the air. Their leader was a giant of a man, easily 8 feet tall and massively muscled. His head was shaved except for a top knot of hair woven with finger bones. His eyes were pools of solid red, no iris or white visible. When he smiled, his teeth were filed into points, and his tongue was split like a serpent's. "The Emperor's lapdogs grow weak," the giant said, and his voice resonated like a landslide. "Horn cares not from whence the blood flows, only that it flows. When will you join us in proper worship?" One of the corrupt Arbites laughed. "When your god pays better than the Imperium's pension plan." The weapons? The cultists opened their crates. Inside were brutal-looking weapons, chinaxes, serrated blades, and what looked like rifles, designed to cause maximum pain rather than clean kills. Cassandra leaned close to Duke. "On my mark, we hit them fast and hard. Kill the cult leader first. Without him, they'll break. The Arbites are secondary targets." "Cult leader first, cult leader first, cult leader first, another targets." Duke nodded, raising the bolt pistol. He'd taken position for the perfect shot. One round through the cult leader's head, then mop up the rest with the Desert Eagle, and the cult leader's head snapped up, those red eyes focusing directly on Duke's position 50 feet above. "Blood for the blood god," the giant roared. Then he jumped. Not climbed. Jumped. His legs bent and launched him 50 feet straight up in a single bound that defied physics. He landed on the catwalk with enough force to buckle the metal, right in front of Duke. Skulls for the skull throne. The giant swung a chain axe the size of a small car. Duke rolled, the weapon missing him by inches and carving through the catwalk like it was made of tissue paper. The entire structure groaned and began to collapse. Duke fired the bolt pistol point blank into the giant's chest. The mass reactive round exploded, blowing a crater in the cultist's torso that should have killed him instantly. The giant looked down at the hole in his chest, at the blood pouring out, and laughed. The wound began to close, flesh knitting together with unnatural speed. "Khorne grants strength to the faithful," the giant roared. "You will be the greatest skull for his throne." Below, the exchange had devolved into chaos. The other cultists were charging up support columns with inhuman speed, their bodies moving wrong, joints bending at angles that shouldn't be possible. Cassandra and her smugglers opened fire, last bolts cutting through cultists, but the wounded kept coming, wounds closing almost as fast as they were inflicted. The corrupt Arbites had drawn their weapons and were firing indiscriminately, just as happy to kill smugglers as cultists. And Duke was falling as the catwalk gave way beneath him. A giant chaos-worshipping cultist with a chine axe and a regenerating body falling with him. "Oh shit," Duke said. They hit the ground floor in a tangle of metal and flesh. Duke rolled away from the chine axe swing that pulverized the floor where he'd been, came up firing the bolt pistol. Each round blew chunks out of the giant, but the wounds closed seconds later, flesh weaving together through chaos-granted power. Magic. The asshole was using actual magic. Duke had fought magic before demon sorcerers, alien wizards, hell knights with reality-warping powers. The trick was always the same. Overwhelming firepower until the magic couldn't keep up. Duke holstered the bolt pistol and drew the RPG launcher from his back. "Hail to the king, baby," he said, and fired at point-blank range. The rocket hit the cult leader in the face and detonated with the force of a small bomb. The explosion vaporized the giant's head, upper torso, and most of his arms. What remained, just legs and a lower torso, collapsed in a spray of blood and bone. That blood didn't hit the ground. It flew upward, forming patterns in the air, 8-pointed stars glowing with angry red light. "He sees," one whispered. "He sees." Then they all screamed and charged Duke with suicidal fury. Duke switched to the Desert Eagle and started firing. Each shot dropped a cultist, but there were too many. One reached him, a woman with her face ritually scarred into a skull pattern, swinging a serrated blade. Duke caught her wrist, twisted until it broke, and put a round through her eye socket. Another cultist tackled him from behind, teeth sinking into his shoulder through his shirt. Duke headbutted backward, crushing the cultist's nose, then spun and shot him twice in the chest. His shoulder burned where the teeth had broken skin. The cultist's saliva felt like acid. Above, Cassandra's smugglers were losing. The corrupt Arbites had focused fire on them, and 2 were already down. Cassandra herself was trading shots with an Arbite sergeant, her stub pistol popping against his armor. Duke reloaded the Desert Eagle while using a cultist corpse as a shield against another attacker. This was spiraling out of control fast. He needed to end it now or retreat. And Duke Nukem didn't retreat. He pulled a pipe bomb from his belt, lit it with a lighter he'd looted from the bar, and threw it into the densest concentration of cultists. The explosion scattered bodies and gave him breathing room to advance on the corrupt Arbites. One of the Arbites turned toward him, shotgun rising. Duke was faster. The bolt pistol roared, and the mass-reactive round exploded the Arbite's head into red mist. The remaining corrupt Arbites broke and ran, their loyalty to chaos not extending to suicidal last stands. The cultists, however, kept coming. Even wounded, even dying, they charged with frothing madness. Duke was down to 3 rounds in the Desert Eagle, 1 rocket for the RPG, and his natural charm, which wasn't very effective against religiously motivated berserkers. Then the world exploded in holy fire. A stream of burning promethium engulfed the remaining cultists, immolating them in seconds. Duke spun toward the source and saw her standing at the entrance to the sector. A woman in power armor painted white and red, wearing a helmet shaped like a skull with glowing red eyes. She carried a flamer that projected fire hot enough to melt steel, and her armor was covered in purity seals and religious inscriptions. Behind her stood 5 more figures in identical armor, all female, all carrying bolters or flamers or chain swords. Their armor bore the symbol of a stylized fleur-de-lis, wreathed in flame, the Adepta Sororitas, the Sisters of Battle, the Emperor's warrior nuns. The lead sister stepped forward, her vox-amplified voice echoing through the chamber. In the Emperor's name, this sector is purged. All heretics will burn. All witnesses will be questioned. Surrender or die. Duke looked at the sisters, at their heavy weapons and fanatical eyes, at Cassandra and her surviving smugglers, frozen in terror. He looked at the dead cultists, still burning, at the corruption they represented, at the impossible regeneration and the reality-defying power of chaos. Then he looked at his empty bolt pistol and mostly depleted Desert Eagle. "You know what?" Duke said. "I think I'll take option 3. He grabbed Cassandra, threw a smoke grenade he'd looted from a dead Arbites, and ran like hell as the sisters opened fire behind him, their bolter rounds cratering the floor where he'd been standing. In the smoke and chaos, Duke Nukem disappeared once more into Hive Tertius's industrial labyrinth, dragging a shocked smuggler with him while the Emperor's most zealous warriors gave pursuit. He'd come to this galaxy expecting aliens and demons. He'd found something worse. Fanatics on all sides, reality-warping powers, and a religion that would kill him as enthusiastically as any demon. Duke was starting to think Earth wasn't so bad after all. The Greenskins hit Hive Tertius 3 days later, and Duke learned that in the 41st millennium, things could always get worse. He'd been hiding in one of Cassandra's safe houses, a repurposed water reclamation facility on level Delta 4, where the smugglers stored contraband and the Arbites rarely patrolled. The surviving smugglers had welcomed Duke as a hero after the Gamma 17 raid. He'd killed a dozen Chaos cultists, crippled a corrupt Arbite cell, and escaped the Sisters of Battle. In the Underhive, that made him either blessed by the Emperor or protected by darker powers. Either way, people wanted him on their side. Duke was cleaning the bolt pistol when the first alarm sounded. They weren't the local Arbite sirens he'd grown accustomed to. These were deeper, more primal mechanical horns that resonated through the hive structure itself, making the walls vibrate. Every speaker in the facility crackled to life simultaneously, broadcasting the same message in mechanical Gothic. Alert. Xenos incursion detected. Species identification. Orcs. Threat level. Extreme. All Imperial citizens report to designated defense stations. The Emperor protects. Failure to comply is heresy. Cassandra burst into the room where Duke had been working, her face pale. "We need to move. Now. When the orcs come, they don't stop until everything is dead, or they are. This hive has maybe 8 hours before the lower levels are overrun. Duke had read about orcs in the data slate. Green-skinned aliens that reproduced through spores, grew larger the more they fought, and whose technology literally worked because they believed it would. Their entire society was built around war, and they traveled the galaxy looking for fights that would eventually kill them. They were nature's perfect killing machines with the approximate intelligence of football hooligans and the stopping power of tanks. "How many are we talking?" Duke asked, loading the bolt pistol. The auger arrays detected at least 300 before the sensors were destroyed. But orcs travel in hordes. There could be thousands, tens of thousands. Cassandra was throwing supplies into a pack: water, ammunition, medical supplies. The Imperial Guard will deploy to the upper levels. They'll sacrifice the Underhive to buy time for evacuation of essential personnel. That means everyone down here dies. Dies. Duke stood and checked his inventory. He'd looted a chainsword from a dead cultist, but using it required getting close to whatever you wanted to kill, never his preferred method. "What about your people?" Duke asked. "Most fled topside already. A few stayed to guard the cache. If we don't move it now, months of stockpiled weapons and supplies fall into orc hands or get destroyed when the guard firebombs this level." Duke considered the situation. He could run, hide, maybe find a way off-world in the chaos. Or he could stand and fight against an alien invasion of green-skinned warmongers who defied physics through collective stupidity. It wasn't even a choice. How much time do we have before they reach this level? Cassandra checked a Voxcaster on her belt. Maybe 2 hours. The breaching occurred at the Hive's southern wall, levels Gamma through Epsilon. They're fighting through the industrial sectors, killing everything. The guards' holding actions are not going well. Duke smiled. And it was the smile that had preceded the deaths of alien overlords, demon princes, and anything else stupid enough to stand between him and victory. "Then we'd better make those 2 hours count. Show me your armory." The cache was impressive by Underhive standards. Cassandra's network had stockpiled enough weapons to outfit a small army. Las guns by the dozen, stub pistols, a heavy bolter that looked like it could punch through a wall, cases of frag grenades, even a meltagun, a weapon Duke recognized from the data slate as capable of flash vaporizing armor with a beam of fusion energy. "Christmas came early," Duke said, checking the meltagun's charge. "Full capacity. One shot would turn an orc into superheated gas." 4 of Cassandra's smugglers had stayed behind. Victor, a former guardsman with a bionic arm. Ratch, a mutant with thermal vision. Helena, a woman who'd apparently killed her way out of an ecclesiarchy convent. And Tog, who didn't speak but carried a flamer with the easy competence of someone who'd burned things for a living. They looked at Duke like he was insane for staying. "Listen up," Duke said, laying out the meltagun, heavy bolter, and cases of grenades. Big ones, small ones, smart ones, and ones too stupid to know they should be dead. These orcs? They're just target practice with anger management issues. They're 7 feet tall, strong enough to rip a man in half, and their shooters fire so many bullets it doesn't matter if they can't aim, Victor said, his bionic hand clenching unconsciously. "I fought them during the Gazkul Crusade, watched them tear through guard squads like paper. The only way to stop them is overwhelming firepower or die trying." Duke picked up the heavy bolter, a massive weapon designed to be mounted on a tripod, but which he could just barely manage to carry, thanks to his enhanced strength. "Then it's a good thing I'm really good at overwhelming firepower. Here's the plan. We set up in the main approach corridor, create a kill zone, and turn this facility into a meat grinder. They want this cash? They're going to pay for every inch in blood." Cassandra shook her head. "That's suicide. We should evacuate, save what we can carry, and let these things get weapons they can use against other people?" Duke met her eyes. "Not happening. You want to run. Run. I'm staying." For a long moment, Cassandra stared at him. Then something shifted in her expression. Recognition, maybe. Or respect. Or the particular brand of insanity that made people stand their ground against impossible odds. "You're either the bravest man I've ever met or the dumbest," she said finally. "Victor, Ratch, set up the heavy bolter in firing position Alpha. Helena, Tog, plant the grenades along the approach corridor. Pressure triggers. We're making this the Emperor's most expensive kill." "Thought you didn't worship the Emperor," Duke said. "I don't. But if we're dying like guardsmen, might as well steal their rhetoric." The orcs arrived 90 minutes later, and Duke understood why the Imperium feared them. He'd taken position behind a makeshift barricade of supply crates and scrap metal. The heavy bolter braced on a sandbag, the meltagun at his side. Victor manned a lasgun beside him, while Ratch covered their flank with thermal vision tracking movement through the walls. Helena and Tog had fallen back to secondary positions with flamers ready. Cassandra coordinated from the Voxcaster, relaying information from guard channels. "They've broken through Delta 2. Guard squads are falling back. Casualties at Emperor's Throne, 60% losses already." Then Duke heard them. It started as a rumble that built into a roar, hundreds of guttural voices bellowing in anticipation of violence, accompanied by the thunder of heavy footsteps and the mechanical growl of crude engines. Wah! 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 They poured into the corridor like a green tsunami. Orcs, dozens of them. Each stood 7 feet tall minimum, massively muscled with green skin, tusked jaws, and eyes that glowed red with bloodlust. They wore armor cobbled from scrap metal and old Imperial plates, covered in clan symbols and kill markings. Their weapons were oversized, crude-looking guns that shouldn't work but fired anyway, shootas that spat bullets in wild sprays, choppas that were basically chainsaw swords the size of surfboards. The biggest orc, probably the leader, or Knob, as the dataslate had called them, was 9 feet of muscle and violence wearing spiked armor. He carried a power claw that crackled with energy and a shooter the size of an autocannon. "Yumis!" the Knob roared. "Finally, some proper scrapping!" Wag! Duke opened fire. The heavy bolter screamed, mass reactive rounds tearing through the first wave of orcs. Bodies exploded as the warheads detonated inside green flesh, painting the corridor in alien blood. But the orcs just laughed and charged harder, firing their shootas in wild sprays that filled the air with bullets. Duke held the trigger down, sweeping the heavy bolter across the horde. Orcs fell by the dozen, but more kept coming, climbing over the corpses of their fellows without hesitation. Their shootas chewed through the barricade, forcing Duke to duck as rounds whizzed overhead. Victor was firing methodically, each last bolt taking an orc in the head or chest. Helena and Tog unleashed Prometheum streams that immolated the front ranks, turning orcs into burning torches that kept charging even as their flesh melted off. The pressure triggers activated. Grenades planted in the corridor detonated in a chain reaction that turned the approach into a kill zone of shrapnel and fire. Orc bodies were shredded, limbs scattered. But the survivors just bellowed louder and charged faster. "Zog off, Omies. We's gonna crump you good." Duke dropped the heavy bolter empty and grabbed the meltagun. He aimed at the Knob leading the charge and pulled the trigger. The fusion beam lanced out and hit the massive orc center mass. For a split second, the Knob was outlined in white-hot light. And then he simply ceased to exist, vaporized at the molecular level. Armor and all. The orcs behind him didn't slow. If anything, they got excited. That was a good scrap. It died proper. Now it's our turn. Duke switched to the bolt pistol, firing into the mass of green bodies. Each shot exploded an orc skull or torso, but they were closing the distance. 20 feet, 15, close enough to smell the fungal reek of their bodies and see the crude clan markings tattooed on their skin. Duke drew the chainsword with his left hand and the Desert Eagle with his right. An orc reached the barricade, its choppa swinging down. Duke fired the Desert Eagle point blank into its face, the .50 caliber round blowing through the back of its skull. The orc collapsed, and Duke vaulted the barricade to meet the next one. The chainsword screamed as it bit into orc flesh. Duke parried a choppa strike, the blades showering sparks, then fired the Desert Eagle into the orc's gut at contact range. Green blood sprayed. The orc headbutted him hard enough to crack his sunglasses the first time they'd been damaged, and Duke responded by revving the chainsword and driving it up under the orc's jaw, through its skull. 2 more orcs tackled him, dragging him down under their combined weight. Fists like hammers pounded his ribs. Teeth snapped at his throat. Duke got the Desert Eagle against one's temple and fired, then used the chainsword to disembowel the second. Victor was screaming, firing his last gun on full auto until the power pack died. An orc grabbed him by his bionic arm and ripped it off, taking half his shoulder with it. Victor fell, and the orc crushed his skull with one stomp. Helena went down next, dragged into the horde and torn apart by eager hands. Tog managed 3 more seconds of flamer fire before a shoot-up burst cut him in half. Cassandra was still alive, firing her stub pistol with mechanical precision. But she was out of position and surrounded. Duke fought his way toward her, the chainsword carving through orcs with savage efficiency. The Desert Eagle clicked empty, last round spent, and he threw it into an orc's face with enough force to shatter its jaw before drawing the bolt pistol with his freed hand. He was bleeding from a dozen wounds. His ribs were cracked. One eye was swelling shut where an orc fist had connected. The chainsword was clogged with so much gore it was starting to jam, and he was laughing. "Come on!" Duke roared, firing the bolt pistol into an orc's chest at point-blank range. The orcs loved it. They pressed harder, their war cries reaching a fevered pitch. This was what they lived for, a proper scrap, an enemy who fought back, violence so pure it made them feel alive. Duke reached Cassandra just as an orc was raising a choppa to split her skull. He tackled the alien, driving the chainsword into its spine, then pulled Cassandra behind him. "Still think I'm dumb for staying?" Duke gasped. "Yes," Cassandra said, reloading her stub pistol with shaking hands. "But I'm starting to think you're blessed by something." The orcs were thinning, maybe 30 left from the 100 that had charged. The corridor was piled with green bodies. The air was thick with gun smoke and the fungal reek of orc blood. Then he heard it. A rumbling engine sound growing louder. From the rear of the orc mob, something massive was approaching. A battle wagon, an orc vehicle that was half tank, half junk pile, all violence. It rolled over the bodies of dead orcs without slowing, its engine roaring, mounted shooters firing indiscriminately. The thing was 15 feet tall and covered in armor plates, spikes, and kill markings. "Oh, you've got to be kidding me," Duke muttered. The remaining orcs parted to let the battle wagon through, cheering as it leveled its main gun, a massive cannon that looked like it had been welded together from random scrap but would definitely explode anything it hit. Duke looked at Cassandra. "Run." "What about you?" Duke hefted the RPG launcher, last rocket loaded. Cassandra hesitated 1 second, then ran for the back exit. Duke stepped into the open, raised the RPG launcher, and aimed at the battle wagon. The orcs saw him and went silent, even they recognized the moment before something gloriously violent was about to happen. The knob in the battle wagon's cupola pointed at Duke and roared with joy. "Now dad's a proper umi. Gonna mount his skull on me battle wagon. Hail to the king, baby," Duke said. The rocket streaked across the corridor and hit the battle wagon's fuel tank. Duke had seen it leaking promethium. The explosion was catastrophic. The battle wagon detonated like a bomb, taking out the remaining orcs in a fireball that filled the corridor from floor to ceiling. The shockwave threw Duke backward 20 feet. He hit the ground hard, feeling ribs crack further, tasting blood. His ears rang. His vision swam. But he was alive, and the orcs were dead. Duke lay there for a moment, staring at the ceiling, breathing hard. Then he started laughing, the kind of laugh that came from surviving something that should have killed you. He'd just fought off 100 orcs with smugglers and improvised weapons. He'd killed a war boss, destroyed a battle wagon, and held a position against impossible odds. In the 41st millennium, that made him either a hero or a madman, probably both. Cassandra appeared above him, her face streaked with soot and blood. Yeah, Duke said, accepting her help to stand. But I'm alive. They're not. That's what counts. Behind them, the guard were moving in professional soldiers in flak armor, clearing the corridor with las guns and flamers. They found Duke standing in a pile of orc corpses, bleeding and battered but grinning like he'd just won the lottery. One of the guardsmen, a sergeant with burn scars covering half his face, stared at Duke for a long moment. Then he raised his fist in salute the Imperial Aquila. For the Emperor, the sergeant said. Duke, who'd just fought and killed for people he didn't know, on a world he didn't care about, against aliens he'd never heard of a week ago, returned the gesture without thinking. For the Emperor, he said, though he had no idea what the words really meant. In the corridors of Hive Tertius, word began to spread of the stranger who'd held the line against an orc, WAAGH, with nothing but courage, firepower, and an ego that refused to accept defeat. And in the upper spires, Inquisitor Catherine Voss heard the reports and smiled coldly. The heretic was revealing himself. Soon, she would have him. The Mechanicus delegation arrived 48 hours after the orc incursion was repelled, and Duke learned that in the Imperium, heroism attracted the wrong kind of attention. He'd been recovering in Cassandra's main safe house, a converted promethium refinery on level Delta 7, with actual running water and beds that didn't have things living in them. His ribs were taped, the wounds from orc fists and teeth stitched with black thread, and he'd acquired a new collection of scars to add to his already impressive catalog. The sunglasses were cracked but functional. His ego was untouched. The Imperial Guard had requisitioned most of the smuggler's weapon cache as emergency wartime allocation, which was apparently legal theft when the Imperium did it. They'd left Duke alone, though the sergeant who'd saluted him had filed a report calling him an unaffiliated militia asset of acceptable competence. In the Imperium's Byzantine bureaucracy, that meant Duke existed in a gray zone between heretic and hero. Cassandra had used the chaos to expand her network, trading information about orc movements for protection from the Arbites. The smuggling business was booming. People wanted off-world passage, weapons, food that wasn't corpse starch. She'd offered Duke a permanent position as her enforcer. He'd been considering it when the tech priests arrived. There were 5 of them, and they barely qualified as human anymore. Their bodies were more machine than flesh, mechadendrites writhing from their backs like steel tentacles, optical lenses replacing eyes, vox grills where mouths should be. They wore red robes embroidered with gear symbols and binary code, and they moved with the eerie precision of clockwork. The lead tech priest was the most extensively modified. Half his skull was replaced with brass and copper. Cables ran from his neck into his torso, and his lower body was a tracked platform instead of legs. When he spoke, his voice was a synthesized monotone that came from speakers embedded in his chest. I am Magos Explorator Theta, 7 Prime of the Adeptus Mechanicus, Mars Forge World Delegation. You are designated Unknown Variable, Technological Anomaly, Archaeological Interest, Query, Origin of Weaponry, Query, Technological Sophistication, Query, Knowledge of Standard Template Construct Systems. Number 1. 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 Duke, lying on a cot with his shirt off, while Cassandra changed his bandages, raised an eyebrow. That's a lot of words for, where'd you get your guns? The Magos' mechadendrites twitched. Levity, not appreciated. Seriousness of inquiry, absolute. Your weapons analyzed from guard reports. Desert Eagle, 50 caliber handgun. Manufacturing technique unknown. Material composition suggests pre-Age of Strife origin. RPG launcher. Chemical propellant system. Guidance, none. Effectiveness, acceptable. Bolt pistol, Stolen from Inquisitorial Interrogator. Irrelevant. Query stands. Origin? I made them. Duke lied smoothly. Back on my world before I got dragged through whatever hell portal dumped me here. The tech priests went silent. Their mechadendrites stopped moving. Even their breathing, those that still breathed, paused. It was the silence of religious figures hearing blasphemy so profound they couldn't process it. Innovation, the Magos finally said, the word dripping with computerized horror. Claim. Original creation. Implication. Tech heresy of highest order. Penalty. Death and recycling of biological components. However, combat effectiveness demonstrated. Orc casualties. Estimated 97. Ammunition efficiency. Acceptable. Survival rate. Miraculous. Conclusion. Subject possesses either divine blessing or archaeotech knowledge. Investigation. Required. Duke sat up, ignoring the pain in his ribs. Let me guess. You want to dissect me to figure out how I work, strip my weapons for study, and if I resist, you'll have me killed for tech heresy. How am I doing? Accuracy. 73%. Correction. Dissection not required if cooperation provided. Alternative. Subject becomes Mechanicus asset. Shares technological knowledge. Receives protection from Inquisition and Arbites. Weapons returned after duplication. Survival probability increased to 47%. 47%, Duke repeated. Those are rookie numbers. I've survived worse odds while naked and surrounded by strippers. The tech priests consulted among themselves in binary. A rapid-fire series of beeps and clicks that hurt Duke's ears. Cassandra had gone very still, her hand near the stub pistol at her belt. The tension in the room was thick enough to cut. Finally, the Mago spoke again. Proposition. Test of technological knowledge. Subject will examine Mechanicus equipment. If subject demonstrates understanding beyond standard Imperial citizen education. Subject classified as Archaeotech savant. Protection granted. If subject fails, subject remanded to Inquisition for standard heresy processing. And if I tell you to go fuck yourselves, violence. Inadvisable. Tech guard contingent waiting outside. Combat servitors. 4. Skidderai rangers. 8. Probability of successful resistance. 3%. Probability of facility destruction. 91%. Collateral casualties. Estimated 417. Duke glanced at Cassandra, who gave the slightest shake of her head. 400 people lived in this district. The Mechanicus would kill them all without hesitation if Duke resisted. Then file a report justifying it as acceptable losses during heretic apprehension. Fine, Duke said, standing and pulling his shirt on. Show me your broken toy. I'll take a look. The Magos' optical lenses focused on Duke, with what might have been satisfaction. Compliance. Noted. Subject will accompany delegation to Mechanicus Shrine. Time frame. Immediate. The Mechanicus Shrine was 3 levels up. Carved into the hive's superstructure, like a cathedral to the machine god. Every surface was covered in gears, cogs, and incomprehensible machinery. Servitors lobotomized humans, grafted to machines, shuffled past, performing maintenance tasks with dead eyes. The air smelled of sacred oils and ozone. Tech priests chanted in binary as they worked, their prayers synchronized with the rhythm of pistons and engines. To them, this wasn't industry. It was worship. Every gear turned in praise of the Omnissiah. Every machine was a sacred text to be preserved and revered. The Magos led Duke to a chamber where the test waited. A machine the size of a car, covered in rust and corrosion, with components scattered around it like a mechanical corpse. Cables hung loose, gears had seized. Whatever it had been, it was dead. Designation: plasma generator. Mark 7 pattern. The Magos explained. Origin. Age of technology. Function. Power generation at efficiency exceeding current imperial standards. Status. Non-functional for 217 years. Mechanicus attempts at restoration. 43. Successes. 0. Task. Identify malfunction cause. Duke walked around the machine, hands in his pockets, sunglasses reflecting the shrine's dim lighting. The tech priests watched with their inhuman focus, mechadendrites poised like serpents ready to strike. He'd worked on alien power cores before. This was just engineering with a gothic aesthetic. Duke knelt and examined the primary coupling. The corrosion wasn't random, it was focused on specific connection points. He traced the power flow, following cables that led to a central chamber. Inside, he found the problem. A regulator valve that had been installed backward, slowly corroding the entire system over 2 centuries. Your ancestors were idiots, Duke said bluntly. This valve's backward. It's been feeding power in reverse, corroding the coupling from inside. You flip it, replace the corroded sections, and this thing runs fine. Silence. The kind of silence that preceded either revelation or execution. The Magos moved forward with mechanical precision, his mechadendrites extending to examine the valve Duke had indicated. Binary chatter filled the air as tech priests confirmed Duke's analysis with their instruments. Diagnosis. Correct. The Magos said finally, and there was something like awe in his synthesized voice. Error. Installation reversed during restoration attempt 41. Oversight. Catastrophic. Subject demonstrates. Archaeotech understanding. Conclusion. Subject is savant, blessed by Omnissiah. Potential STC inheritor. I'm a what now? Standard template construct. Another tech priest explained, his voice reverent. Holy patterns from age of technology. If subject possesses STC knowledge, subject becomes most valuable asset in sector. Resources, unlimited. Status, elevated to Mechanicus Omega level archaeological priority. Duke processed that. He'd just gone from heretic to holy relic in the span of 5 minutes by fixing a machine these idiots had been staring at for 2 centuries. The Mechanicus worshipped technology they didn't understand, treating engineering like theology. They'd turned science into religion and forgotten how to actually build anything new. So I'm valuable now, Duke said carefully. Valuable enough that the Inquisition can't just execute me? Affirmative. Mechanicus protection supersedes inquisitorial authority in matters of archaeotech preservation. However, Inquisitor Voss has filed petition for subject examination. Legal dispute. Ongoing. Resolution timeline. Uncertain. Great. He was caught between religious robot people who wanted to study him and religious warrior nuns who wanted to burn him. The 41st millennium just kept getting better. One condition, Duke said. I work with you. You help me understand this galaxy. I need information on warp travel, planetary defenses, and how to survive without getting burned at the stake every 5 minutes. The Magos' mechadendrites twitched in what might have been agreement. Terms. Acceptable. Subject will be designated. Mechanicus Consultant. Temporary rank. Technographer 3rd class. Subject receives. Data access. Limited Mechanicus protection. Workshop space. Subject provides. Technological consultation. Archaeotech analysis. Innovation insight when deemed acceptable by doctrine. And the Inquisitor? Inquisitor Voss's petition. Delayed through bureaucratic process. Estimated delay. 6 to 8 months. Imperial standard. Sufficient time for subject to prove value exceeding risk. Recommendation. Prove value quickly. Duke smiled. 6 months was plenty of time to figure out this nightmare galaxy. acquire better weapons, and maybe find a way home. Or at least find a way to survive with his ego intact. "Baby," Duke said, "you've got yourself a deal." As he shook the Magos' metallic hand, Duke missed the figure watching from the shadows of the shrine, a woman in power armor, her augmented eye glowing red in the darkness, her expression cold and calculating. Inquisitor Catherine Voss had seen enough. The heretic had just allied with the Mechanicus, making him harder to eliminate. But Voss hadn't purged 40 billion souls by accepting bureaucratic delays. She would have her investigation, and she would have her answers. The stranger who killed without prayer, who possessed archaeotech weapons, who survived chaos, corruption, and orc assaults without the Emperor's blessing. He was either the greatest asset the Imperium had found in centuries, or its most dangerous threat. Voss would discover which, and if he was a threat, she would burn him personally, Mechanicus protection or not. The workshop the Mechanicus provided was larger than Duke's apartment back on Earth had been, and infinitely more gothic. Every wall was carved with prayers in binary. The tools were blessed with sacred oils before each use, and the servitors that delivered materials were former criminals, lobotomized and grafted to machines as punishment for tech heresy. Duke tried not to think about that last part too much. He'd been given 3 days to prove his value before the Magos presented him to the higher-ranking tech priests of Mordian's Gate. 3 days to demonstrate he wasn't just lucky, but genuinely blessed with archaeotech knowledge. 3 days before Inquisitor Voss's bureaucratic roadblocks ran out, and she came for him with bolt pistol and power sword. No pressure. Duke stood at a workbench, examining the components the Mechanicus had provided. Scrap metal from destroyed orc vehicles, Imperial Guard lasguns, damaged beyond standard repair, power cells salvaged from failed systems, and a pile of what looked like medieval clockwork mechanisms. The Mechanicus wanted him to build something that would impress them. "You know what impresses people?" Duke muttered to himself. "Bigger guns." He'd started sketching designs when Cassandra arrived, escorted by nervous Skitarii Rangers who clearly didn't want to be near the valuable heretic savant. She carried a data slate and wore an expression Duke was learning to recognize. "Trouble incoming. We need to talk," she said once the escorts left. "Your new friends are spreading word about you through Mechanicus channels. That means everyone knows. The Inquisition, the Guard, even the criminal networks. You're famous now, and that's dangerous." Duke didn't look up from his sketches. "Famous is fine. Famous means people think twice before shooting at me. Famous means people shoot at you for different reasons. The Chaos cults see you as either a threat or potential recruit. The Xenos-aligned gangs think you've got archaeotech worth stealing. And the Sisters of Battle," she paused. "One of them came to see me, said she wanted to talk to you." That made Duke look up. "The warrior nuns? The ones who tried to burn me last week?" "One sister. She came alone, no weapons visible, and asked very politely." "That's unusual. Sisters don't ask. They demand, burn, then pray for the Emperor's forgiveness." Duke considered that. In his experience, when religious fanatics asked politely, it meant they either wanted information before killing you, or they were conflicted about killing you. Both scenarios were opportunities. "Where is she?" "Waiting in the shrine's chapel." The Mechanicus isn't happy about it, but they can't refuse a Sister of Battle without causing an incident. And religious politics. Cassandra's expression was grim. "Duke, be careful. Sisters are true believers. They'll die for the Emperor without hesitation, and they'll kill for him even faster. Whatever she wants, assume it ends with you on fire. If you say the wrong thing." Duke holstered the bolt pistol. He'd requisitioned ammunition from the Mechanicus in exchange for fixing their plasma generator and headed for the chapel. Time to find out what the Emperor's warrior nuns wanted with him. The chapel was a small chamber dedicated to dual worship. The Omnissiah for the Mechanicus, the Emperor for everyone else. Candles burned before icons of both, and the air was thick with incense that smelled like burning circuitry and sanctity. The Sister of Battle stood before the altar, her armor removed. She wore the simple black body glove that went under power armor, and Duke could see she was younger than he'd expected, maybe 30 standard years. Her hair was cut short in a military style, and her face bore the same severe beauty as Inquisitor Voss, but without the cold cruelty. She turned as he entered, and her eyes assessed him with professional interest. "You're the stranger," she said. Her voice was softer than expected, cultured, with an accent that suggested education above her station. "The one who killed Interrogator Hendrik, survived Chaos cultists, and held against an orc way, without prayer." "That's me," Duke said, stopping a respectful distance away. No reason to provoke the woman trained since childhood to kill heretics. "You got a name? Or should I just call you Sister?" "Sister Helena Castellan, Order of the Valorous Heart. I've been assigned to investigate you by Canoness Superior Agatha. Normally, that investigation ends with purging fire and your ashes scattered in an incinerator. But I've read the reports, watched the picked captures, interviewed witnesses, and I have questions. Shoot. Why do you fight? You owe the Imperium nothing. You don't worship the Emperor, don't pray before battle, don't invoke his protection. Yet you stood against Chaos and Xenos without hesitation. Why?" Duke leaned against the chapel wall, considering his answer. He could lie. Tell her what she wanted to hear about the Emperor's unconscious blessing, or some bullshit about finding faith. But something about Sister Helena suggested she'd see through that. She wasn't stupid, and she wasn't asking rhetorical questions. "Where I come from," Duke said finally, "there's no God Emperor, no Imperium, just people trying to survive against things that want to kill them. Aliens, demons, dictators, doesn't matter what you call them. Someone has to stand up and say, 'Not today.' That someone is me. Always has been. Sensen." Sister Helena was quiet for a long moment. "The Lectitio Divinitatis teaches that the Emperor protects all humanity, even those who don't know his name. That faith itself, even unconscious faith, is a shield against chaos. You claim no faith, yet you resisted a chaos cult whose corruption should have tainted you just by proximity. Maybe I'm just stubborn, or maybe the Emperor protects you despite your ignorance." She moved closer, and Duke noticed she had a scar running from her left eye to her jaw, a wound that should have killed her. "I've fought chaos for 12 years. I've seen what it does to people. The temptation, the corruption, the promises of power. Men with faith stronger than steel fall to it daily. Yet you, a stranger with no faith at all, walked through it untouched. That's either a miracle or a mystery that threatens everything we believe." Duke met her gaze. "Which do you think it is?" "I don't know yet. That's why I'm here instead of burning you from orbit. Canoness Agatha wants you dead, another heretic refusing the Emperor's light, but I convinced her to let me investigate first, to determine if you're a threat or..." She hesitated. "Or, proof that the Emperor's mercy extends further than we thought." This was dangerous ground. Duke could feel it. Sister Helena was offering him something, not salvation exactly, but a chance. If he could convince her he wasn't a chaos-tainted heretic, she might protect him from her more zealous sisters. If he failed, she'd kill him herself. "What do you need from me?" Duke asked. "Truth. Complete honesty. I'll know if you lie." She gestured to a bench near the altar. "Sit. Tell me everything. Where you're from, how you arrived, why you fight. Leave nothing out. The Emperor's truth is absolute, and only through it can we discern the ruinous power's deception." Duke sat, and for the next 2 hours, he talked. About the demons he'd killed, about his life as a one-man army against anything stupid enough to threaten humanity. He left out the more ridiculous parts, the strippers, the ego, the one-liners, and focused on the fights, the principles, the core of who Duke Nukem was. Sister Helena listened without interruption, her expression unreadable. "Your Earth sounds like a paradise compared to this. she said finally. One world, relatively peaceful, with enemies that can be defeated through simple violence. Here, violence is endless. The Imperium spans 1,000,000 worlds, and every single one is under constant threat. We fight for survival, one day at a time, knowing that eventually the darkness will consume us all. Sounds depressing. It's truth. The Emperor teaches that humanity is doomed, that our purpose is to delay the inevitable, while inflicting maximum damage on our enemies. Hope is heresy, because hope makes people weak, makes them question why we sacrifice billions for inches of territory. Faith is all we have, and faith demands absolute obedience. Duke heard something in her voice, a crack in the armor, doubt buried deep. You don't sound entirely convinced. Sister Helena's hand moved to the bolt pistol at her hip, and Duke tensed. But she didn't draw it. Instead, she traced the weapon's outline through muscle memory, her eyes distant. I've killed 10,000 enemies of the Imperium, she said quietly. Heretics, Xenos, cultists, mutants. I've burned worlds on Canoness Agatha's orders. I've executed guardsmen for falling back without orders, civilians for harboring psychers, children for bearing mutations. Every death was righteous, necessary, the Emperor's will. But sometimes, at night, I wonder. She stopped, as if saying more would be heresy, even in thought. Wonder what, if there's another way? If the Emperor truly demands such cruelty? Or if we've made him, in our own brutal image? If faith requires questioning nothing? Or if blind faith is just cowardice with a religious excuse? You fight without faith, yet you're honorable. You kill without prayer, yet you protect innocence. You're everything the Lectitio Divinitatis says is impossible. And that either makes you a miracle or makes our teachings lies. Duke saw the opening. Sister Helena wasn't looking for a heretic to burn. She was looking for proof that her doubts weren't damnation. She wanted to believe there was meaning beyond endless slaughter, that humanity could be more than a death cult with starships. Maybe, Duke said carefully. Your Emperor protects in ways your ecclesiarchy doesn't understand. Maybe faith isn't about obedience, it's about standing up when everything tells you to fall. I don't know your theology, don't care about your religious politics, but I know this. If your God is worth worshipping, he'd want people to fight for what's right, not just follow orders. Sister Helena stood abruptly, and Duke thought he'd overstepped, but instead of drawing her weapon, she made the sign of the Aquila across her chest, the gesture of prayer. Thank you for your honesty, she said formally. I will report to Canoness Agatha that you show no signs of chaos taint, that your combat effectiveness suggests possible divine protection, and that further investigation is required before sanctioning your execution. This grants you approximately 30 days before she overrules me and orders your death. 30 days is better than none. Use them wisely. The galaxy is watching you now. Prove you're worth protecting, or prove the Canoness right by dying heroically against the Emperor's enemies. Either way, your story ends in blood. And stranger, if you are what I suspect, a test of faith sent by the Emperor himself, don't waste the opportunity. End of 4. There are people in the Imperium who need to see that honor exists without dogma, that courage isn't just zealotry. Show them, before the darkness takes us all. She left, her footsteps echoing in the chapel. Duke sat there alone, surrounded by icons of gods he didn't worship, in a galaxy that didn't want him. With 30 days to prove his existence wasn't a threat to the Imperium's entire religious foundation. No pressure, he muttered again. From the shadows near the altar, a voice spoke. She's right, you know. You are a test. But not from any emperor. Duke spun, bolt pistol drawn, to find a woman stepping into the candlelight. She was beautiful, in a way that hurt to look at. Too perfect, too symmetrical, with eyes that shifted color between violet and gold. She wore clothing that seemed to flow like liquid silk, and her smile promised pleasure and pain in equal measure. Every instinct Duke had screamed danger. "Who the hell are you?" The woman's laugh was music and nails on a chalkboard. "I have many names, but you can call me Lilith. I represent, let's call them, alternative interests. Interests that find you fascinating, Duke Nukem. You've rejected the Emperor's faith, resisted Khorne's rage, and now Sister Helena offers you salvation through zealotry. But there's a third option. A better option." Duke kept the bolt pistol trained on her. "I'm opportunity. The Prince of Pleasure sees your potential. Slaanesh appreciates perfection, and you are perfect in your way, the perfect warrior, the perfect survivor, the perfect ego. Join us, and you'll never face meaningless death in this nightmare. You'll live forever, powerful beyond imagination, free from the Imperium's chains." Hard pass. Lilith's expression didn't change, but the temperature in the chapel dropped 10 degrees. "You don't understand what's being offered. 8. The Imperium will use you, break you, and discard you. The Sisters will burn you when you outlive your usefulness. But Slaanesh offers true freedom. Power without limit. Pleasure without end. Existence without death. All you have to do is stop fighting and accept the inevitable." Duke thought about the cultists he'd killed, about their corrupted bodies and maddened eyes. He thought about the reports he'd read of chaos-tainted worlds, where reality itself broke down and humanity devolved into monsters. He thought about the hell dimension he'd seen during his warp transit, the hungry things that lived there. "Here's the thing about inevitability," Duke said. "I've made a career out of kicking its ass. Your chaos gods, your Prince of Pleasure, your whole deal, you're just another set of alien assholes who think humanity should bow down. I've killed gods before, sweetheart. You're not special." For the first time, Lilith's perfect facade cracked. Anger flashed across her features, real anger, the kind that preceded violence. "You dare refuse? We offered mercy, mortal. We could have simply taken you, corrupted you slowly until you begged to serve. But the Prince enjoys the chase, so here's your warning. Chaos will have you eventually. Everyone falls. Everyone. The only question is whether you fall screaming or singing. Option 3. I don't fall at all, and you go back to your hell dimension, empty-handed." Lilith vanished like smoke and wind, but her voice lingered. "We'll see, Duke Nukem. We'll see." Duke stood alone in the chapel, adrenaline fading, realizing he just told a daemon or daemon representative, or whatever the hell she was, to fuck off. The Mechanicus wanted to study him. The Sisters wanted to burn him. The Inquisition wanted to interrogate him. And now Chaos wanted to corrupt him. "I miss LA, Duke said to the empty chapel. Outside, the Imperium's machinery ground on. Billions living and dying in service to a corpse god who might or might not actually protect them. And somewhere in that machinery, Duke Nukem was becoming a legend. The stranger who fought without faith, killed without prayer, and refused to bow to anyone. In the 41st millennium, legends were dangerous things. They attracted attention from forces far worse than men. The rogue trader's offer arrived via courier servitor, a lobotomized human grafted to a hover platform, its mouth replaced with a vox speaker that delivered the message in monotone. Lord Captain Magdalena Kovac of the vessel Crimson Fortune requests audience with technographer Duke Nukem regarding employment opportunity. Meeting location: Upper Spire, Merchant Quarter. Establishment designation: The Gilded Aquila. Time: sunset. Local designation: failure to attend interpreted as disinterest. Lord Captain emphasizes. Opportunity unique. Payment substantial. Violence probable. The servitor waited for Duke's response with the patience of something that had lost its capacity for impatience along with its higher brain functions. Duke was in the workshop, finalizing designs for what the Mechanicus called a blessed multi-purpose combat harness. and what Duke called better armor that doesn't make me look like a medieval robot. The Magos had been impressed, enough with his plasma generator repair to grant him access to workshop materials, and Duke had been using them to upgrade his gear. "Tell your boss I'll be there," Duke said. The servitor emitted a confirmation beep and glided away. Cassandra, who'd been helping Duke sort through scavenged power cells, looked concerned. Rogue traders are dangerous. They have Imperial warrants that let them operate outside normal law, trade with Xenos, explore forbidden space, basically do whatever they want as long as they bring profit back to the Imperium. Some are honorable, most are pirates with paperwork. "Sounds like my kind of people," Duke said. Testing the weight of his upgraded bolt pistol, he'd added a compensator to reduce recoil and modified the grip for his hand size. The Mechanicus had watched him work with the fascination of priests, witnessing miracles, chanting binary prayers. Every time he made an improvement, they considered tech heresy adjacent but acceptable due to results. "Duke, seriously. Rogue traders command void ships crewed by thousands. They have private armies, connections to the Inquisition and Mechanicus, and they don't take rejection well. If Magdalena Kovac wants you, it's not a request. It's a transaction being negotiated." Duke holstered the bolt pistol and checked his other gear. The Desert Eagle had been refitted with ammunition manufactured by the Mechanicus. They'd been horrified by its crude design, but couldn't argue with its effectiveness. He'd acquired a new combat knife, a frag grenade bandolier, and most importantly, a refractor field generator, a piece of archaeotech that projected an energy shield capable of stopping a few hits before failing. "Then I'd better look presentable for negotiations," Duke said, adjusting his sunglasses. The crack had been repaired by a tech priest, who treated the damaged eyewear like a sacred relic, muttering prayers while welding the frame. "Someone has to stop you from starting an interplanetary incident." The Gilded Aquila was everything Duke expected from a high-class establishment in a hive city. Baroque architecture, gold-plated skulls decorating every surface, and enough candles to constitute a fire hazard. The clientele were merchants, minor nobles, and off-duty guard officers, people wealthy enough to afford actual food instead of corpse starch, which apparently was a luxury in the 41st millennium. Armed guards flanked the private dining room, where rogue trader Kovac waited. They wore carapace armor painted in red and gold, carried hellguns, supercharged lasguns, and had the look of professional soldiers who'd killed before and would kill again without losing sleep. Duke was led inside while Cassandra waited at the bar. Magdalena Kovac was in her 50s, her face marked by rejuvenate treatments that had kept her looking 40 for the last century. She wore a coat woven from some alien material that shimmered like oil on water, and her augmented left eye glowed amber in the dim light. A power sword rested on the table beside a bottle of Amasek Imperial liquor that cost more than most citizens earned in a lifetime. "Duke Nukem," she said, gesturing to the seat across from her. "The man who's become the talk of 5 sectors. Sit. Drink. Let's discuss your future." Duke sat but didn't touch the drink. "I'm listening." "Good. Direct. I appreciate that." Kovac poured herself a glass. "My ship needs someone with your particular talents. I've got a crew of 3,000, but most are pressed labor, servitors, or crew who'd sell me out for a better offer. What I need is someone competent, fearless, and lacking the usual Imperial hang-ups about doctrine and prayer. Your reputation suggests you're all three. What's the job? I trade on the borders of Imperial space, sometimes beyond. Xenos artifacts, forbidden technology, information the Inquisition doesn't want found. It's profitable and legal as long as I maintain my warrant and kick profit up to the right people. But it's also dangerous. Pirates, Xenos, raiders, chaos cults, operating in the void. All of them want what I carry. I need someone who can lead boarding actions, protect valuable cargo, and handle situations where diplomacy fails and violence becomes necessary. Duke leaned back. "Sounds like you want a mercenary. Why me specifically?" Kovach's smile was predatory. Because you're already entangled with the Mechanicus, under investigation by the Inquisition, and marked by chaos cults. In 6 months, one of those groups will either kill you or lock you in a cage for study. Working for me gets you off-world, away from the Inquisition's immediate reach, and gives you access to resources that might help you survive this galaxy. Plus, I pay extremely well, and in exchange, you fight when I need you to fight, protect my interests, and occasionally handle problems that require creative solutions. I'm not asking for loyalty. Loyalty is worthless in my business. I'm buying competence and results. Deliver both, and you'll live well. Fail, and I'll leave you on whatever nightmare world we're visiting, and let nature take its course. It was a pragmatic offer. Duke had worked with worse people for worse reasons. And Kovach was right. Staying on Mordian's Gate meant eventually facing Inquisitor Voss, the Sisters of Battle, or whatever Chaos had planned for him. Getting off-world bought him time and options. What about the Mechanicus? They've classified me as Archaeotech priority. The Mechanicus answers to profit like everyone else. I've already negotiated your temporary release. You're on exploratory assignment, seeking lost STC fragments in my employment. They get first refusal on any Archaeotech we find. I get to keep you breathing. Everyone wins. And the Inquisition? Kovach's expression darkened. Inquisitor Voss is problematic. She's filed formal protests against your release, but she can't override a rogue trader's warrant without proof of heresy. You've got maybe 3 months before she manufactures that proof. By then, we'll be in the void beyond her easy reach. Duke considered it. 3 months was more time than Sister Helena had given him. And being on a void ship meant mobility harder, to burn someone at the stake when they were constantly moving between star systems. One condition, Duke said. I don't kill innocent people. Xenos, Chaos, pirates, those I'll fight. But I'm not executing civilians or purging populations because some bureaucrat says they're heretics. Kovach studied him with her augmented eye, and Duke felt like he was being X-rayed and judged simultaneously. You realize that's a dangerously idealistic stance in this galaxy? Non-negotiable. Fine. I rarely deal in mass murder anyway, bad for long-term business relationships. But understand this. Sometimes, innocent is subjective. A cult leader's children, a Xenos trader who sold you information, a crewman who failed one time too many. Can you live with gray choices? Or are you going to be a liability every time morality gets complicated? Duke thought about the Chaos cultists he'd killed, about the corrupt Arbites, about the orcs who died screaming his name. He thought about Sister Helena's question. Why do you fight? I can live with gray, Duke said finally, but I need to sleep at night. That means no atrocities, no unnecessary cruelty. We fight what needs fighting, protect what deserves protecting. Past that, we'll figure it out as we go. Kovach raised her glass. Then welcome aboard the Crimson Fortune Duke Nukem. You'll receive officers' quarters, full armory access, and 20% of your capture value on salvage operations. We depart in 48 hours for the Coronis Expanse. Pack light, shoot straight, and try not to start an intergalactic incident. Duke raised his glass. He'd decided to trust the drink and met Kovach's toast. Baby. Starting incidents is what I do best. The next 48 hours were chaos. The Mechanicus wanted final demonstrations of Duke's Archaeotech knowledge, which meant repairing 3 more ancient machines, while tech priests chanted and recorded everything. Sister Helena visited one more time, giving Duke a purity seal and a warning to remain vigilant against corruption that felt more personal than professional. Cassandra helped him pack and tried one last time to convince him this was insane. Rogue traders operate outside Imperial law, she said, watching Duke load ammunition into cases. You're trusting someone whose primary skill is avoiding consequences for what would get anyone else executed. I'm trusting someone who needs me alive more than dead. Duke corrected. That's more trust than I've got anywhere else in this nightmare. Cassandra was quiet for a moment. What about us? The network? You helped build something here." Duke looked at her, really looked. She'd gone from suspicious smuggler to something like a friend over the past weeks. In a galaxy where friendship was rare and usually fatal, that meant something. "Keep the network running," Duke said. "When I come back through Mordian's gate, I'll need contacts who aren't trying to burn me. You're it. Plus, someone's got to keep these idiots from blowing themselves up without me here." She surprised him by hugging him brief, fierce, then pulling away before either of them could get sentimental. "Don't die out there. The galaxy's already got too few people worth knowing. Baby, dying's for people without style. I'll be fine." The shuttle ride to the Crimson Fortune was Duke's first trip into actual space since his arrival in this galaxy. The void was different here, darker somehow, with the stars seeming more distant and hostile. The warp's presence was visible as purple distortions at the edge of reality, like bruises on the universe itself. The Crimson Fortune was massive. A Cobra-class destroyer 3 kilometers long, bristling with weapons and armored like a flying cathedral. Its hull bore the scars of hundreds of battles, and Duke could see crew performing repairs on damaged sections even as the ship prepared for warp translation. Kovac met him in the hangar bay, accompanied by her command staff. Master at Arms Grigori, a scarred veteran with bionic legs. Navigator Yavanna, a 3-eyed mutant whose gift allowed warp travel. And Enginsir Valkoran, a Mechanicus priest assigned to maintain the ship's systems. "Welcome to my ship," Kovac said. "Your quarters are on Deck 7. We translate to the warp in 6 hours. Until then, familiarize yourself with ship layout and meet your squad." "My squad?" 20 veterans I'm assigning to your command. Boarding actions, ground operations, security details. You're in charge of them. Prove you can lead, and I'll give you more responsibility. Fail, and they'll probably kill you before I have to." Duke grinned. "Lady, you've got a deal." As he followed Grigori toward the barracks, Duke looked out a viewport at Mordian's gate shrinking behind them. Somewhere down there, Inquisitor Voss was planning her next move. The Sisters of Battle were debating his theological implications. The Mechanicus was cataloging his miracles, and Chaos was watching, waiting for him to slip. But up here, in the void between stars, Duke Nukem was free. Free from gravity. Free from Imperial doctrine. Free to be what he'd always been. A warrior who fought on his own terms. The 41st millennium had tried to break him, burn him, corrupt him, and conscript him. It had failed on all counts. Now Duke was taking the fight to the galaxy itself, and the galaxy had no idea what was coming. The warp was exactly as horrific as Duke had feared, and somehow worse. Translation happened 4 hours after Duke met his squad. 20 hardened veterans who'd initially greeted their new commander with suspicion and thinly veiled contempt. Most were former Imperial Guard. A few were ex-Arbites, and one was a former Ganger, who'd apparently impressed Kovac enough to be given a second chance. They'd expected another noble-playing soldier. Instead, they got Duke, who'd immediately challenged their best hand-to-hand fighter to a sparring match and won in 30 seconds. Respect in the 41st millennium was earned in blood. Duke was fluent in that language. Then the Geller field activated, reality screamed, and the Crimson Fortune plunged into hell. Duke felt it the moment they translated. His stomach lurched, his vision doubled, and for a split second, he could see through the ship's hull into the warp itself. Purple storms of impossible geometry churned against the Geller field bubble. Faces formed and dissolved in the chaos, human, alien, and other things that had never been either. Screams echoed through dimensions that shouldn't exist, and Duke felt something vast and hungry notice him. Then the sensation passed, leaving only nausea and the knowledge that they were traveling through a dimension where physics was optional and daemons were real. "First time in the warp?" Grigori asked. The Master at Arms had found Duke in the observation deck, where he'd gone to clear his head. "Yeah," Duke admitted, gripping the railing hard enough to dent metal. "Your galaxy's version of faster-than-light travel is giving demons a front-row seat to our voyage. That's just great. Could be worse. Sometimes the Geller field fails and daemons board. Then everyone dies, screaming while their souls are devoured. But that hasn't happened to the Fortune in at least 20 years. You people have a fucked up definition of could be worse. Grigori laughed the dark laugh of someone who'd survived too much to take anything seriously. Welcome to the Imperium. The Emperor protects, and when he doesn't, we protect ourselves. Speaking of which, Kovac wants you in the briefing room. We've got our first contract, and it involves the reason she hired you. The briefing room was dominated by a hololithic display showing a planet Duke didn't recognize. Gray atmosphere, volcanic activity, and orbital markers indicating industrial facilities. Kovac stood beside the display, with navigator Yvonne and engineer Valkaron flanking her. Gentlemen, Kovac began as Duke and Grigori entered. Welcome to our destination. Epsilon Mordaunt, a forge world that went silent 3 months ago. The Mechanicus officially declared it lost to catastrophic industrial failure. Unofficially, they suspect Xenos or Chaos involvement, but lack forces to investigate. That's where we come in. She manipulated the hololithic display, zooming in on a specific facility. This is Manufactorum Prime 7, the planet's main archaeotech research facility. Before the blackout, they were studying recovered STC fragments, potentially revolutionary technology. My sources indicate those fragments are still there, buried in the facility. We retrieve them. The Mechanicus pays us a fortune. Everyone wins. What's the catch? Duke asked. The catch is, whatever killed everyone is probably still there. Could be Xenos, could be Chaos, could be the facility's defense systems went rogue and murdered the workers. We won't know until we're on the ground. Duke studied the display. The facility was massive, a complex of cathedral-sized buildings connected by underground tunnels, surrounded by defensive walls designed to repel armies. If something had overrun it, that something was extremely dangerous or extremely numerous. What kind of resistance are we expecting? Kovac's expression was grim. Unknown. The last transmission from Epsilon Mordaunt was audio only. Heavily corrupted. I'll play it. She activated a recording, and the room filled with screaming. Not human screaming, something else. Mechanical and organic simultaneously. A sound that hurt to hear. Beneath it, barely audible, a tech priest's voice. In the name of the Omnissiah, seal the... They're everywhere. It's... The transmission ended in static and wet tearing sounds. Duke's squad, who'd been summoned for the briefing, exchanged glances. A few made the sign of the Aquila. One muttered a prayer to the Emperor. They'd all heard death screams before, but that recording was something special. Xenos, Valkoran said, his mechadendrites twitching with agitation. Classification, unknown. Threat level, extreme. Recommendation, orbital bombardment followed by salvage of remaining fragments. That would destroy what we're here to retrieve, Kovac countered. No, we're going in on foot. Duke, you'll lead a 30-man strike team. Your squad plus 10 armsmen. Objective: reach Manufactorum Prime 7's vault. Secure the STC fragments. Evacuate before whatever's down there kills you. Simple. End quote. Verse 7. Reach STC fragments. Simple. Nothing about that is simple, Duke said. You're getting paid to handle the complicated parts. Grigori will be your second. Valkoran goes with you to identify and secure the fragments. I'll provide orbital support and extraction when you signal. Duke had about 1,000 questions, but the important ones boiled down to: what kind of weapons are we authorized to use? And what's the rules of engagement? Everything in the armory is available. Rules of engagement? Kill anything that's not human. And if humans are corrupted by chaos or Xenos influence, kill them too. The Mechanicus wants those fragments intact, but they don't care about collateral damage to the facility. Burn it all if necessary. Just bring me those STC pieces. Duke nodded. When do we drop? 6 hours. Use that time to prepare your team, select your loadout, and make peace with whatever gods you worship. Epsilon Mordant's surface temperature is 200 degrees Celsius. The atmosphere is toxic, and something unknown is waiting in the dark. Happy hunting. 5 hours later, Duke stood in the armory selecting his weapons while his squad did the same. The Crimson Fortune's arsenal was impressive. Hellguns, plasma rifles, melt-a-guns, heavy bolters, even a missile launcher for special occasions. The Mechanicus tech priest assigned to the ship had blessed every weapon with sacred oils and prayers, which Duke supposed couldn't hurt. He'd selected a Hellgun as his primary, more punch than a lasgun, better range than the bolt pistol along with the bolt pistol as a sidearm, his refurbished Desert Eagle as backup, a combat knife, and enough frag grenades to level a building. The refractor field generator was clipped to his belt, charged and ready. His squad was gearing up around him. 20 veterans plus 10 armsmen, all checking weapons with the practiced efficiency of people who expected to use them soon. Grigori was helping the newer members adjust their carapace armor. A few were praying. Most were just silent, focused, dealing with pre-combat tension in their own ways. Duke recognized the look. He'd seen it on soldiers before every major battle. The knowledge that some of them wouldn't come back, but they'd do the job anyway, because that's what soldiers did. "Listen up," Duke called out, and 30 heads turned toward him. "I'm not going to bullshit you with speeches about duty or the Emperor's glory. You're professionals. You know what we're walking into. Unknown Xenos, possible chaos taint, and a facility that ate an entire Forge World's garrison. The odds suck." A few grim smiles at that. They appreciated honesty, but here's what I know about Xenos and chaos. They bleed when you shoot them right. They die when you blow them up. And they lose when people like us refuse to quit. So we're going down there. We're getting those fragments, and we're coming back alive. Anyone who survives gets a round on me when we're back on the ship. That's a promise. One of the veterans, a woman named Kira with a bionic arm, raised her Hellgun in salute. "For the Fortune," the squad echoed. "For the Fortune, not for the Emperor," Duke noticed. These were rogue trader crew. Their loyalty was to the ship, not the Imperium. That was refreshing in its honesty. Valkorin approached, his mechadendrites carrying additional equipment. Technographer Duke. Equipment distribution complete. Atmospheric rebreathers for toxic environment. Auspex scanners for detection. Meltabombs for breaching. Additionally, he handed Duke a device that looked like a modified Voxcaster. Emergency beacon. If hostile forces overwhelm position, activate beacon. Orbital bombardment will commence within 90 seconds. Survival probability after activation, 17%. Non-activation survival probability, 3%. Recommendation: activate beacon only as last resort. 17% is better than 3. I'll take it. The 1-hour warning klaxon sounded. They were entering Epsilon Mordant's orbit. Duke led his squad to the dropship bay, where a Arvis lighter, a armored transport designed for hostile zone insertions, waited with engines hot. Through the bay's force field, Duke could see Epsilon Mordant below, a gray world wreathed in volcanic clouds. Its surface dotted with the ruins of forge complexes. Somewhere down there, in Manufactorum Prime 7, the STC fragments waited. And something else waited too. Something that had killed thousands, and would try to kill 30 more. Duke Nukem had faced worse odds. Not often, but he had. "Mount up," Grigori ordered, and the squad filed into the lighter. The interior was cramped, lit by red emergency lights, smelling of promethium and fierce sweat. The pilot, a savant with direct neural interface to the ship's systems, began pre-flight checks. Kovach's voice came over the Vox. "Strike team, this is Fortune Actual. You are cleared for deployment. The Emperor protects, and if he doesn't, ammunition does. Good luck." The lighter detached from the Crimson Fortune and dove toward Epsilon Mordant, carrying 30 soldiers into whatever nightmare waited below. Duke checked his weapons one last time, adjusted his sunglasses out of habit, and smiled the smile of a man who'd kicked ass across dimensions and wasn't about to stop now. "Time to kick ass and chew bubblegum," he muttered. Behind him, Kira asked, "What's bubblegum?" "Something I miss. You'll understand when we're done here." The lighter hit the atmosphere, and Epsilon Morden's hell welcomed them with volcanic fire and screaming winds. This was going to be fun. The lighter touched down on Epsilon Morden's surface, in a crater that had once been a landing pad. Its edges melted into glass by weapons fire or something worse. The ramp dropped, and Duke led his squad into a toxic atmosphere that turned the air yellow and made visibility drop to 50 meters. Through his rebreather, Duke tasted recycled air that still somehow carried the scent of burned metal and organic decay. The temperature readout on his auspex showed 203 degrees Celsius, hot enough to cook a human without proper gear. The carapace armor's cooling systems kicked in immediately, fighting a losing battle against the Forge World's heat. Manufactorum Prime 7 loomed ahead like a Gothic cathedral dedicated to industry. Massive walls rose hundreds of feet, covered in prayers to the Omnissiah and the skeletal remains of defensive turrets. The main gate hung open, its adamantium doors torn from their hinges by something with immense strength. Scorch marks and last burns covered every surface, evidence of a desperate last stand. "Spread out," Duke ordered, his voice transmitted through vox beads to the squad. "Two-man teams, watch your sectors. Anything moves, you call it out before shooting. I want to know what we're facing before it knows we're here." The squad deployed with professional efficiency, moving through the gate in a tactical advance that would have impressed Imperial Guard sergeants. Duke moved with Grigori, hellgun raised, scanning the facility's entrance courtyard. Bodies everywhere. Hundreds of them. Tech priests, Skitarii, warriors, servitors, all dead, but not fresh. The heat had desiccated the corpses into mummies, their faces frozen in expressions of terror. Many were missing limbs or had been torn apart by something with claws and teeth. "Not last fire," Grigori observed, kneeling beside a dead Skitarii. "These wounds are organic. Xenos, definitely. But what kind tears through Skitarii armor like paper?" Duke's auspex pinged. "Contact front!" Duke shouted, raising his hellgun. They emerged from the darkness, like nightmares given flesh. Creatures 8 feet tall, hunched and insectoid, with chitinous armor that reflected the volcanic light in sickly rainbow patterns. Their heads were elongated, eyeless, with mouths that opened vertically to reveal crystalline teeth. 6 limbs each, 2 for walking, 4 for killing. They moved with horrifying speed, skittering across walls and ceiling as easily as the floor. "Open fire!" Duke pulled the trigger, the hellgun's overcharged last bolt punching through the lead creature's torso. It screamed that mechanical organic sound from the recording and kept coming, green ichor spraying from the wound. The courtyard erupted in gunfire. 30 hellguns and bolters firing simultaneously filled the air with last bolts and mass reactive rounds. The Xenos died by the dozens, their bodies exploding or burning or simply disintegrating under concentrated fire. But more kept coming. They poured from the facility's entrance like insects from a hive, dozens becoming hundreds, their screams building into a chorus that drowned out even the weapons fire. "Fall back to secondary position," Duke ordered, firing in controlled bursts as he retreated. "Grigori, get those meltabombs ready." The squad fell back in good order, maintaining fire discipline as the Xenos pressed forward. Duke saw Kira take a hit. One of the creatures lunged at her, its claws tearing through her armor before she put her hellgun against its head and fired point blank. The creature's skull exploded, but its death throes knocked her down. Duke grabbed her, hauled her behind cover as another wave of Xenos charged. "Stay down. Grigori, now!" Grigori threw 3 meltabombs into the densest concentration of Xenos. The thermal charges detonated with white-hot fury, vaporizing everything within 10 meters and turning the courtyard into an inferno. Xenos' bodies melted, their screams cutting off abruptly as they were flash-cooked. The remaining creatures retreated back into the facility, dragging their dead with them. Duke's auspex showed the contacts withdrawing deeper into the structure. "Head count," Duke called. "2 wounded, no dead," Grigori reported. "But we used 1/3 of our ammunition in that engagement. If that was just the welcome party, then we're going to need a bigger gun." Duke checked his Hellgun's power cell, half depleted. The bolt pistol had 4 rounds left. He'd burned through 2 frag grenades. They were 20 minutes into the mission and already running low on resources. Valkorin scuttled forward on his tracked lower body, mechadendrites extending to examine a dead Xenos. Species identification, unknown to Mechanicus records. Biological analysis suggests silicon-based life form, crystalline internal structure, hive-minded behavior patterns. Hypothesis: these are what the tech priests mistook for STC fragments. They found a Xenos artifact that was actually a hibernating organism or egg cluster. "You're saying the STC fragments are alive?" Duke asked. "Affirmative. And the Mechanicus awakened them during research. Casualties: inevitable. Current situation: extreme danger. Come of long time. Come of long time. Extreme danger. Extreme danger. Extreme danger. Recommendation: abort mission. Request orbital bombardment. Accept mission failure." Duke looked at his squad. They were breathing hard, checking weapons, helping the wounded. 2 men were staring at the dead Xenos with the expression of soldiers realizing they'd underestimated their enemy. But none of them were running. None were suggesting retreat. "How far to the vault?" Duke asked. Valkorin consulted his auspex. 600 meters through main facility structure. Estimated Xenos presence: 400 to 600 organisms. Survival probability: less than 1%. Then we'd better get moving before it drops to 0. "Squad, on me. We're getting those fragments and getting out. Anyone who wants to stay behind and guard our exit, speak now." Silence. Duke smiled behind his rebreather. "Let's go kill some bugs." They advanced into Manufactorum Prime 7, into darkness lit only by their weapon-mounted luminators, into a facility that had become a tomb and a hive simultaneously. The Xenos waited in the shadows, their screams echoing through Gothic halls. And Duke Nukem led his squad deeper into hell, with nothing but guns, attitude, and the certainty that quitting wasn't an option. The 41st millennium had tried to break him with faith, bureaucracy, and corruption. Now it was trying to kill him with alien monsters in a volcanic hellscape. Duke was almost starting to enjoy himself. Behind them, the entrance collapsed as more Xenos emerged, cutting off their retreat. The only way out now was forward, through 600 meters of hostile territory, against hundreds of silicon-based nightmares that had already slaughtered thousands. "Keep moving," Duke ordered, firing at movement in the shadows. "We die if we stop, so we don't stop." The squad pushed deeper, leaving the surface behind, descending into Epsilon Mordant's industrial heart, where ancient secrets and hungry Xenos waited in equal measure. The vault was a cathedral to the Omnissiah, and it had become a slaughterhouse. Duke's squad had fought through 300 meters of Xenos-infested corridors, leaving a trail of dead creatures and spent ammunition behind them. They'd lost 4 soldiers, torn apart by Xenos swarms, dragged screaming into ventilation shafts, or simply overwhelmed when the creatures adapted to their tactics. The survivors were exhausted, low on ammunition, and running on pure adrenaline, but they'd reached the vault. The chamber was massive, 50 meters high, carved with prayers in binary and decorated with statues of ancient tech priests. At the center, on a raised dais, surrounded by defense servitors that had been torn to pieces, sat a crystalline structure the size of a truck. It pulsed with inner light, patterns shifting across its surface like living mathematics. "The STC fragment," Valkorin breathed, his mechadendrites extending toward it with religious reverence. "No, multiple fragments, fused together. This is unprecedented, if genuine." This represents technology from humanity's golden age. Power generation, weapon systems, possibly even the crystal pulsed, and Duke's instincts screamed danger. Back. He grabbed Valkorin and dragged him away. As the crystal exploded, not destructively, but expansively, light flooded the chamber, and from within the crystal structure, something emerged. It was Xenos, but different from the creatures they'd been fighting. Larger, easily 15 feet tall, with armor that looked organic and technological simultaneously. Its eyeless head swiveled toward them, and when it opened its mouth, the sound was language. Alien language, but language nonetheless. Intruders. You disturb the crystalline archive. You awaken the architect's children. You will be incorporated. Duke raised his hellgun, knowing it was useless against something that size. Incorporated how? And who the hell are the architects? The creature tilted its head. Query recognized. Response. The architects seeded this galaxy with preservation nodes. Your species discovered this node. Your species is now raw material for node defense. You will join the archive or you will feed the archive. Choice. Irrelevant. I'm really getting tired of everyone in this galaxy trying to kill, corrupt, or recruit me, Duke said. Here's a counteroffer. We're taking that crystal. You're getting out of our way, and everyone walks away alive. How's that sound? The creature's laugh was crystalline chimes mixed with metal scraping. Impossible. The archive cannot be removed. The archive is eternal. You are temporary. Reconcile this truth, or be reconciled by force. It lunged with impossible speed. Duke rolled, the creature's claws tearing through the floor where he'd been standing. He fired the hellgun, lost bolts sparking harmlessly off its armor. Grigori opened up with a heavy bolter, mass reactive rounds exploding against the creature's chest, but barely slowing it. Valkorin! Duke shouted over the chaos. How do we kill this thing? Unknown. Standard weapons ineffective. Recommendation. Retreat and orbital bombardment. Unknown. Not an option. Duke dodged another attack, the creature's claws missing him by inches. Around the chamber, his squad was engaging the smaller Xenos that were pouring in through every entrance. The fight was turning into a last stand. Then Duke saw it. The creature's connection to the crystal structure. Every time it moved, light flowed from the crystal into its body, through a visible energy tether. It wasn't just guarding the archive, it was powered by it. The crystal, Duke yelled. Shoot the crystal. That's tech heresy of the highest order, Valkorin protested. That fragment could revolutionize the Imperium, and we'll all be dead if we don't. Duke switched to the bolt pistol 3 rounds left, and fired at the crystal structure. The mass reactive warhead hit and exploded, cracking the crystal's surface. Light bled out, and the creature screamed. Target the crystal! Grigori caught on immediately. All units, focus fire on the Xenos artifact. 30 weapons turned on the crystal simultaneously. Last bolts, bolter rounds, and plasma fire hammered into the structure. Cracks spread across its surface like a spiderweb. The light inside began to flicker and die. The creature charged Duke in desperation, moving faster than anything that size should move. Duke had 1 second to act. He pulled the emergency beacon from his belt, the one Valkorin had given him with 17% survival probability, and threw it not at an escape point but directly at the crystal structure. Then he activated it. Everyone down! Duke hit the deck as the beacon began broadcasting. 90 seconds until orbital bombardment. The creature reached the crystal, trying to protect it. 60 seconds. Duke's squad was pinned down by Xenos swarms. Kira was firing her last power cell. Grigori's heavy bolter clicked empty. 30 seconds. The creature turned toward Duke, recognizing what he'd done. It charged, crystal claws extended, death in every movement. Duke stood, drew the Desert Eagle last magazine, 7 rounds, and emptied it into the creature's head at point-blank range. The .50 caliber rounds didn't penetrate its armor, but they staggered it long enough for Duke to roll away. 10 seconds. Brace. Duke grabbed the nearest piece of cover. 5 seconds. The creature reached the crystal, trying to merge with it, trying to become invulnerable. 0. The orbital strike hit like the fist of an angry god. A lance strike from the Crimson Fortune, powerful enough to level a city block, punched through Manufactorum Prime 7's roof and struck the crystal structure dead center. The energy released was catastrophic. Duke felt the shockwave hit, felt himself lifted and thrown like a rag doll. His refractor field sparked and died absorbing impacts. His armor cracked. His ribs broke again. His sunglasses finally shattered completely. Then darkness. Duke woke to pain and Kovach's face looking down at him. "You're alive," she said, sounding genuinely surprised. "The Medicaid gave you 40-60 odds. Congratulations on beating them." Duke tried to sit up, found his torso wrapped in medical tape and his left arm in a cast. They were in the Crimson Fortune's Medicaid bay, clean and sterile, and blessedly far from Epsilon Mordant. The squad? His voice was rough. 17 survivors out of 30. Grigori's fine, already back on duty. Valkorin lost 2 mechadendrites, but he'll recover. Kira's being fitted for a new leg. She lost the original when the facility collapsed. Could have been worse. The crystal? Kovach's expression soured. Destroyed. Vaporized by the orbital strike. The Mechanicus is furious. They wanted that archive intact. But I explained that retrieving corpses was less profitable than retrieving survivors. And they've accepted the mission as a partial success. We salvaged some crystalline fragments from the debris field. Not worth what we hoped, but enough to cover expenses. Duke leaned back, processing that. In most military operations, that would be called a disaster. Did we at least kill that thing? Unknown. The strike vaporized everything in a 200-meter radius. If it survived, 4 Mani 2-meter. It's buried under a kilometer of collapsed facility. The Mechanicus has quarantined Epsilon Mordant. No one's going back there for at least a century. Kovach handed him a glass of water. But you accomplished the primary objective. You survived, which means my investment in you paid off. You've got officers' quarters permanently now, and your squad, what's left of them, requested to stay under your command. That's high praise from Rogue Trader crew. Duke drank the water, thinking about the soldiers who died following his orders, about the facility full of Xenos they'd left behind, about how close they'd all come to being incorporated into some alien archive. "What's next?" he asked. "We're heading to Port Wander for resupply and crew replacement. Then I've got contracts in the Coronis Expanse, exploring dead worlds, trading with Xenos. The usual profitable heresy. You'll have time to heal, train your squad, and prepare for the next disaster." She stood to leave, then paused. "Duke, you did good down there. Not everyone could have made those calls. The decision to destroy the archive instead of dying to preserve it, that takes either wisdom or insanity. I'm still deciding which. Can't it be both?" Kovach smiled. "In this galaxy? Probably. Rest up. The Expanse doesn't forgive weakness, and we've got a lot of profitable sinning ahead of us." She left, and Duke was alone with his thoughts, his broken ribs, and the knowledge that he'd just survived another nightmare the 41st millennium had thrown at him. He'd fought chaos cultists, orcs, and alien archives. He'd been investigated by the Inquisition, blessed by the Mechanicus, and debated by the Sisters of Battle. He'd killed without prayer, survived without faith, and refused to bow to anyone, not the Emperor, not chaos, not even ancient alien AIs. And he was still alive, still fighting, still Duke Nukem. Somewhere on Holy Terra, Inquisitor Voss was filing reports and sharpening her power sword. Somewhere in the warp, Chaos was watching and waiting. Somewhere in the galaxy, new threats were emerging that would eventually find their way to Duke. But for now, in this moment, Duke Nukem had done what he did best: survive impossible odds through firepower, attitude, and refusing to accept that impossible meant anything. The Medicae servitor brought him medication, which Duke accepted. As consciousness faded, he thought about Earth, about the life he'd left behind, about whether he'd ever find his way home. Then he decided it didn't matter. Home was wherever he decided to make his stand. And right now, in the 41st millennium, Duke Nukem was making that stand on a rogue trader vessel, full of criminals, heretics, and survivors. He'd fought for worse causes with worse people. This would do just fine. 3 months passed in the void, and Duke Nukem's legend continued to grow. Word spread through the Coronis expanse of the rogue trader's new enforcer, the stranger who fought without prayer, who'd survived an alien archive and orbital bombardment, who led boarding actions with the fearlessness of space marines but without their indoctrination. Some called him blessed, others called him cursed. A few whispered he was a sign that the Emperor's protection extended beyond faith itself. Duke didn't care about the rumors. He cared about results. The Crimson Fortune had taken him to a dozen worlds, dead civilizations, Xenos-held systems, places where the Imperium's light didn't reach, and survival was earned in blood. He'd fought orc pirates, negotiated with dangerous Xenos traders, and watched his squad evolve from mercenaries into something resembling a brotherhood. They'd learned that Duke's orders might be crazy, but they kept people alive. That was worth more than prayer. Inquisitor Voss's pursuit had slowed. She couldn't chase a rogue trader across the expanse without violating jurisdictional protocols, but her agents occasionally appeared in ports, asking questions, offering rewards for information. Duke stayed mobile, stayed valuable to Kovac, and stayed one step ahead of the Inquisition's reach. Sister Helena had sent one message through Mechanicus channels. Continue proving the Emperor's mercy is wider than doctrine. Your actions matter. Stay alive. It was unsigned, but Duke knew her hand. The Mechanicus cataloged every repair he made, every insight he provided, building a file that classified him as either archaeotech savant or the most sophisticated tech heretic in Imperial history. They hadn't decided which, but they protected him regardless. Knowledge was sacred, even heretical knowledge. And chaos? Chaos kept watching, kept whispering, kept waiting for Duke to falter. He'd resisted temptation on 4 separate occasions, now Slanesh's pleasure, Siench's knowledge, Korn's glory, even Nurgle's peace. Each time, Duke had told the ruinous powers the same thing. He didn't bow to anyone, not even gods. It was the kind of defiance that should have gotten him killed or corrupted 1,000 times over. Instead, it made him valuable. The Imperium had millions of faithful soldiers who obeyed without question, but it had only one Duke Nukem, a warrior who fought because fighting was what he did, who survived because quitting wasn't in his vocabulary, who refused to be broken by a galaxy designed to crush individual will. On Port Wander, between contracts, Duke stood at an observation deck, watching ships come and go through the void. Traders, guard transports, Mechanicus forged ships, all part of the Imperium's endless machinery. Each vessel carried stories of survival, sacrifice, and suffering on scales he was still learning to comprehend. Grigori joined him, carrying 2 bottles of Amasec. The squad's ready for whatever nightmare Kovac has planned next. Duke accepted the bottle. What do you think she's planning? Something that pays well and might kill us. That's her pattern. Grigori drank, then looked at Duke seriously. You know you can't run forever. Eventually Voss will corner you, or Chaos will make an offer you can't refuse, or the Mechanicus will decide you're too dangerous to live. In this galaxy, everyone's survival is temporary. Then I'll make my temporary survival last as long as possible. Duke raised his bottle in salute, to the fortune, to the squad, and to staying alive despite everything this nightmare galaxy throws at us. They drank, and behind them the stars turned in their ancient patterns, indifferent to human struggles. uncaring about Duke's defiance or the Imperium's eternal war. But somewhere in that indifference, Duke Nukem had carved out a space for himself. Not through faith, not through corruption, but through sheer stubborn refusal to accept that this was all there was. He'd shown that courage didn't require doctrine, that honor could exist without dogma, that one man could make a difference even in a galaxy of quadrillions. The Imperium would never understand him, Chaos would never claim him, the Xenos would never defeat him, because Duke Nukem had learned the 41st millennium's most important lesson. In the grim darkness of the far future, there might be only war, but warriors who refused to be broken could still shape how that war was fought. He'd arrived in this galaxy expecting to find his way home. Instead, he'd found a purpose. Surviving with his humanity intact, fighting on his own terms, and proving that even in hell, free will mattered. The war was far from over. Inquisitor Voss would come eventually, Chaos would keep tempting, the Mechanicus would keep studying, and new threats, Tyranids, Necrons, whatever other nightmares this galaxy spawned would find their way to Duke. But when they did, they'd find the same thing every enemy found. A warrior in sunglasses with a bad attitude, bigger guns, and zero interest in bowing to anyone. Hail to the king, baby. In the grim darkness of the far future, there was only war, but at least now, there was Duke Nukem fighting it. In the grim darkness of the far future, there is only war. More stories await.